Chapter 68. Chuyang almost fainted. Beautiful study room. I only wanted to use these swords as bait, that's all. Why did I sell the leduo of all the martial artists in the world? It's just selling a sword, is there a need to be so serious? I actually became the enemy of all the martial artists in the world after selling this sword. If that's really the case, then I really can't live on. Chuyang was speechless for a long time before he finally found a reason. Jiyu Duxing, why did you pawn the sword? I wanted to eat. Jiyu Duxing's brain couldn't wrap itself around it. He didn't know why the other party brought this up. Yes, you wanted to eat. So you pawned the sword that you love more than your life. Chuyang nodded and pointed at his own nose. But what about me? Have you ever thought that I also need to eat? If I don't eat, I'll still starve to death. I'm the same as you, understand? If I don't sell the sword and I don't have any other skills, what will I eat? Do you eat people? Chuyang asked aggressively. The more he spoke, the more he felt that he was in the right. He actually questioned loudly. His saliva almost sprayed onto Jiyu Duxing's face. What this bastard said was pure nonsense. The plaque outside his door was made of pure gold and silver. Why would he need to worry about food and drink? But Jiyu Duxing obviously didn't notice or didn't think of it. Looking at Chuyang's agitated appearance, he couldn't help but be tongue-tied. Only then did he remember that this guy in front of him also needed to eat. Although you didn't show any martial skills, I can't see through your cultivation. Jiyu Duxing finally found a reason. With your skills, why don't you steal or rob? You can at least fill your stomach, right? That's still better than selling such a divine sword. Fuck your mother. Chuyang was filled with righteous indignation. He shouted righteously, how can I, Chuyang, be such a person? Your words are simply insulting my persistence, blaspheming my spirit, tainting my will, and raping my character. I thought you looked dignified, but I didn't expect you to be a thief. Bah. The last word was practically spat out. Beautiful study room. Jiyu Duxing's face was full of saliva. Jiyu Duxing had asked Chuyang the same question that Chuyang had asked Jiyu Duxing just now. But he had been scolded by Jiyu Duxing at that time. Now that Jiyu Duxing had asked about it, Chuyang was even more untouched. In fact, he was even more aggressive in returning the favor. He couldn't help but feel refreshed. Who the fuck dared to scold the soaring dragon sword king? He dared to do so when he was old. Jiyu Duxing recalled his answer just now, and immediately felt somewhat ashamed. That's right, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. If I don't do it, why would this righteous young man do it? He sat in this shop that was filled with stolen silver from top to bottom. He couldn't help but feel respect for Chuyang in his heart. It turned out that Chuyang was just like him. He was also a man with perseverance and ambition. It turned out that he was not alone after all. Who said I was stupid? Isn't there a fellow traveler in front of me? Although Jiyu Duxing was mercilessly reprimanded by the opposite party, he suddenly felt that this young man in front of him was cute. There was a feeling of being like-minded and caring for each other. But, even if it was for food, Jiyu Duxing looked at these two swords and two sabers, and his heart really ached. The muscles on his face twitched. Thinking that such divine weapons would be sold to someone else, he really felt distressed. This wasn't pawning them. Once they were sold, it would be a complete loss. This matter, can we discuss it at length? Jiyu Duxing said cautiously, Brother Chu, for such treasured swords, as people who love swords, we have to find a good home for them. If money isn't that important, well, what I mean is, we can still barely get by. Chuyang rolled his eyes and sighed. What do you think we should do? Jiyu Duxing was stunned. How about this? I'll give these swords to you, and you sell them. Is that okay? Chuyang had a flash of inspiration. Suddenly, an idea came to him, and he couldn't help but be excited. Since you have nothing to do, just be my assistant here. This way, you don't have to pawn the treasured swords, and you can eat and have a place to stay. Most importantly, you can also find a suitable owner for these divine weapons, and not let them be covered in dust and shame. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Brother Jiyu, what do you think? Her. Jiyu Duxing was a little dizzy. He really couldn't imagine how he would become someone else's assistant with just a few words. But it seemed like this was also a feasible plan. The reason he came out was to escape. Well, since it was to escape, wouldn't it be escaping there as well? Thinking of the reason he ran away from home this time, Jiyu Duxing couldn't help but sigh deeply. Sigh, what should I do? Why? You don't agree? Chu Yang asked nervously. It's not that I don't agree, but… Jiyu Duxing seemed to have something he couldn't say. Since it's not that you don't agree, then it's settled. Chu Yang interrupted him and directly made a conclusion. Brother Jiyu, from now on, we are a family. Haha, from now on, you have the final say in this shop. Whoever you want to sell to, I'll sell to. Well, I don't really know much about this business. Chu Yang was telling the truth. He really didn't know much about this business. But this didn't affect him from using this business to make Jiyu Duxing stay. As long as you stay, can you run away from me? If something happens in the shop, you won't care. Damn it, if you don't care, I'll give these swords to a beggar. See if your heart hurts. Anyway, it doesn't hurt. With Calamity Sword, I can have as many as I want. Therefore, under Chu Yang's continuous deceit, Jiyu Duxing foolishly stayed behind and became Chu Yang's assistant. This guy was crazy about swords, but this was the first time he went out in his life. In addition, he sneaked out, so he naturally didn't have any experience in the martial world. In the eyes of Chu Yang, an old fox with 2 generations of experience, he naturally couldn't refuse. It had to be said that being young was good. Easy to deceive, of course. The biggest reason was that Jiyu Duxing couldn't see through Chu Yang's cultivation. In his heart, anyone whose cultivation he couldn't see through was naturally stronger than him. Being an assistant under such a strong person and achieving his goal of escaping from his clan didn't seem too bad. It wasn't shameful. After wolfing down the white rice that Chu Yang had brought out, Chu Yang had deftly tidied up a room for him and stuffed him inside. After a night, Jiyu Duxing asked Chu Yang doubtfully, "There's something wrong, what is it?" Chu Yang rubbed his temples. He thought to himself, did this guy's brain suddenly become good? Brother Chu, you only said that you'll provide food and accommodation, but you didn't say anything about salary. Jiyu Duxing stared and said, you can't let me work for free, right? I'm a swordsman after all. I should at least have a few taels of silver a month, right? It seemed that this guy was still somewhat unwilling. Chu Yang fainted. Brother Jiyu, there are 2 cabinets in your room. Have you seen them? Jiyu Duxing nodded. Those cabinets contain all my belongings. They're not locked. Chu Yang looked as if he was confiding in him. Brother Jiyu, although we've met for the first time and have never met before, we hit it off right away. I've put my life in your hands. Jiyu Duxing was stunned. Then, he turned and ran in. After a while, a scream came from the room. Chapter 69. It had to be said that the moment he opened the cabinet, even Jiyu Duxing, who had seen a lot of gold and silver treasures, was shocked. The golden light was dazzling. Gold. Gold bricks. Gold ingots. They were all gold, and there were also huge banknotes more than a foot thick. For a moment, young Master Jiyu felt a little dizzy and disoriented. For a moment, he only thought that he had entered the treasury of some rich man. Chu Yang actually arranged for him to stay in the treasury and didn't restrict him. Sob sob, this feeling of being trusted at the end of the road was really too good, too warm. Chu Yang waved his hand earnestly. Brother Jiyu, you and I feel like old friends at first sight. You're treating me like an outsider. He thought to himself, at my place, there are still a few more cabinets. I've robbed dozens of rich men, how can I only have so little? But I still have great use for them. Jiyu Duxing nodded repeatedly. Suddenly, a question arose in his mind. Brother Chu, since you have so much money, why are you still selling that kind of famous sword? Last night, this guy had said that if he didn't sell it, he wouldn't be able to eat. But this cabinet of gold and silver banknotes, how was he going to explain it? This gold was enough for 3 generations of rich men to indulge in wine and women. Not able to eat. How ridiculous was this? Please forgive me, Brother Jiyu. I lied to you last night. Chu Yang looked as if his trick had succeeded. Brother Jiyu, do you really think that I sold this kind of famous sword casually? I just felt that it was a pity to see it covered in dust. So, I tried my best to find a good home for it. Chu Yang sighed. This kind of sharp weapon must be in the hands of the right person. It can slaughter the world and laugh proudly in the Jianghu. It can display its peerless elegance in a place of rain and blood. That is the ultimate home of a famous sword. How difficult is it for a person to find a suitable sword? However, it was even more difficult for a sword to find a suitable owner. It's rare that Brother Jiyu and I are like-minded. I can also slack off, haha. I see. Jiyu Duxing smiled. The knot in his heart had been untied. He smiled very contentedly. In his heart, a kind of great minds think alike feeling arose. This kind of famous sword was not something to be bought and sold. Even if Chu Yang had some schemes because of this, it was also because he thought highly of him. It had to be said that this kind of mentality after having a good impression of him was different. Because once this warm feeling appeared, even if what the other party did was wrong, he would find an excuse for the other party, and the excuse he found was one that made him feel comfortable. Of course, it is my wish to find the true owner of the famed sword. But we also need to earn enough money for our meals. Chu Yang smiled and said, moreover, if the owner of the famous sword doesn't pay a certain price, even if he gets it, he may not cherish it. Jiyu Duxing nodded and said sympathetically, that's right. I remember back then when I obtained the black dragon, I practically went through a lot of hardships. The two smiled at each other. Compared to the soaring dragon sword emperor in his previous life, the current Jiyu Duxing was undoubtedly less wise and farsighted, and more impulsive and childish like a teenager. Chu Yang naturally knew the value of the person in front of him. Jiyu Duxing's stubbornness, his obsession with swords, his persistence in life, and his stubbornness in doing things had not changed in his previous life. Such a person was definitely worth befriending. Chu Yang did not have Jiyu Duxing's stubbornness as a sword. In his opinion, that kind of persistence was simply foolish. But this did not stop his heart from admiring Jiyu Duxing. This kind of difference in character was also the reason why Chu Yang in his previous life became a revered martial artist, but not a revered sword artist. Because although he used a sword, all his skills were not just in the sword. Brother Jiyu, how do these few swords of mine compare to your black dragon? Chu Yang asked. In terms of sharpness, they surpass my black dragon. In terms of toughness, they also surpass my black dragon. Jiyu Duxing seriously thought for a while and answered seriously, but in my heart, my black dragon is still one of a kind. These few swords of yours, although they are rare divine weapons in the world, I keep feeling that something is missing. If I had to choose, I would still choose my black dragon. His fingers lovingly stroked the sword hilt at his waist, and the emotions in his eyes at this moment were so sincere. He was like a young man who was deeply in love, looking at his lover. Although his lover was not an outstanding beauty, and standing beside a top beauty, there was still a long way to go. But the only one who could tug at his heartstrings would always be this one person. Other beauties could make him admire them, but if he had to choose a partner to spend his life with, there would only be this one person. What was missing? Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Jiyu Duxing's feeling was right. These few swords looked incomparably sharp, but they were really missing something. Because the iron essence had already been swallowed by the calamity sword. And that was the true essence of a sword. Without the iron essence, these few swords were just iron pieces that were terrifyingly dense, and could not become the legendary divine weapons. Because they could never have spirituality. Treasured swords had spirituality, and the more people they killed and drank blood, the more spirituality they would have. But even if these few swords slaughtered the entire world, they would only be ordinary pieces of iron. This subtle difference could only be seen when one reached the level of Sword King, such a high level of swordsman fought. Before this, no one would be able to detect the difference. But although Jiyu Duxing was only a sword great master now, with his keen intuition, he could already feel that something was wrong with these few sword. Brother Jiyu, I did not set up this heavenly armament pavilion just for this. Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, I have other motives. But this heavenly armament pavilion also needs to exist. This is very complicated and dangerous. It's also very dangerous. I need your help. Chu Yang smiled. Actually, I really did not think that there would be someone like you. But since you are here, I will not let you go. I believe in you, and I believe in my foresight. Jiyu Duxing's eyes flashed with a sincere smile. Okay. It was just one word, but it was Jiyu Duxing's promise. He could hear that Chu Yang's words were hiding a lot of things, but they were sincere. From the bottom of his heart. So he agreed immediately. No matter what, it was only because the person in front of him was pleasing to the eye. Secondly, this person helped him at the most difficult time. The two smiled at each other, and their two palms heavily clapped together. No one would have thought that this day's clapping would create a legend in the heavenly layer continent. I come from a big clan. Jiyu clan. You may not understand the weight of the Jiyu clan. To be honest, in the entire lower three heavens, there may not be anyone who knows the terror of the Jiyu clan. Jiyu Duxing held his wine cup, and his eyes showed a trace of nostalgia. He said with deep feelings, I am the foster son of the clan leader. After my biological parents died in an accident, my foster father took me to his side and nurtured me with great care. Chu Yang nodded. If I don't know about the Jiyu clan, who will? If I don't know about such a huge clan, I will simply kill myself. So the rumors were wrong. The future successor of the Jiyu clan was actually the foster son of the Jiyu clan, and not the direct descendant. My foster father has a daughter and two sons. Jiyu Duxing said, my two sworn brothers ostracized me all year round. As for me, I've really never thought of fighting or snatching anything from them. So I have always resigned myself to it. I am very clear that I am only the foster son of the clan. The core of the clan's power does not belong to me. Even if I have some achievements in the future, I will protect this clan and not let anyone in the clan get hurt. But I will never become the master of this clan. Jiyu Duxing smiled. This kind of smile seemed so out of place on his cold, chiseled face. Chapter 70. Foster father's daughter is older than me by a year. It was because of her that I left the Jiyu clan. Jiyu Duxing's eyes were bitter but also sweet. Since I was young, Sister Xiao Miao has been my guardian angel. No matter what difficulties or harsh reprimands, Sister Xiao Miao has always stood in front of me. When my two foster brothers made things difficult for me, Sister Xiao Miao has always helped me. She taught me things I didn't know. She helped me things I couldn't touch. She even went against the clan elders and her own brother for me. I have always been under her protection. I grew up safe and sound. Since I was young, every time I was on the verge of a breakthrough, she would go to the clan's medicine garden and the clan's treasure house to find elixirs for me to help me break through. There were many elixirs that were treasures of heaven and earth. They were priceless treasures that could only be found by chance. And these priceless treasures, along with Sister Xiao Miao's meticulous help, made me a genius. My path of cultivation was smooth sailing. I almost never met any bottlenecks. Because of the elixirs that far surpassed the bottleneck, no obstacle could be an obstacle, and Sister Xiao Miao stole a lot of elixirs. They were elixirs that even foster father and a few elders were unwilling to use. Because of this, Sister Xiao Miao suffered many punishments because of me. And all of this, I was ignorant. Because every time, Sister Xiao Miao would tell me, just eat these things, there are plenty of them at home, and I would just eat them like a fool. Chu Yang listened silently. He finally understood the reason why Jiyu Duxing was able to create a cultivation legend at such a young age in his previous life. With the enormous manpower and resources of the Jiyu clan, how could the elixirs they collected be ordinary? Jiyu Duxing ate so many elixirs, it would be strange if his cultivation speed was not fast. We've all grown up. As for me, because of Sister Xiao Miao's unbridled and unending supply of elixirs, my cultivation speed has far surpassed all of my peers. I continuously broke through one level after another, becoming the focus of all the clans. But they don't know how much effort Sister Xiao Miao put into this genius, and how many grievances she suffered for me. And I have always been proud. Proud of my own talent. Heartless. Jiyu Duxing's eyes flashed with a sparkling light. Suddenly, he raised his head and drained the cup of wine in one gulp. He grabbed the wine jug and filled it to the brim. Until one day, Sister Xiao Miao helped me break through to Sword Great Master, and brought me the family's most precious treasure, the purple cloud Ganoderma. This has infuriated the entire family. Jiyu Du Xing fiercely punched himself in the head. When I broke through the bottleneck of Sword Great Master, foster father broke one of Sister Xiao Miao's legs in a fit of rage. They locked her up. Because of this, my two sworn brothers became even more resentful of me. They came to cause trouble for me, but I, who didn't know what was going on, beat them up. Then the eldest brother said, "Don't you feel ashamed hiding behind a woman? Now that you've caused Miao Ling to be in such a miserable state, don't you feel guilty?" I was shocked and chased after them to ask. This time, they didn't hide anything and told me everything. Jiyu Du Xing's tears dripped into the wine cup. I went to find foster father, but he just sighed. He told me that Sister Xiao Miao had been punished by the elders for stealing the family's property many times, and was locked up in the dragon prison cave. And the time limit was forever. Because the purple cloud Ganoderma is the family's most precious treasure, it was only waiting for the first Supreme Elder to take it when he broke through to Martial Emperor. If he succeeded, he would lead the family to become the #1 family, and then charge into the upper three heavens, establishing the family's only hope of hegemony. Sister Xiao Miao stole it and gave it to me, and I had already taken it, ruining the family's decades of preparation. This is unforgivable to the entire family. If someone from another family of equal strength can become a martial emperor first, then the Jiyu family will be destroyed at any time. And Sister Xiao Miao gave me the purple cloud Ganoderma, which is equivalent to cutting off the family's path forward. This mistake is unforgivable. Chu Yang sighed deeply. At this moment, from Jiyu Du Xing's description of Jiyu Miaoling, he saw Mo Qing Wu. These two women are obviously the same. For the person they love, they will do anything. In their eyes, there is nothing else except for the person they love. I went to see Sister Xiao Miao because foster father allowed it. It was the only chance I had to see her. After I saw her, she was about to be locked up in the dragon prison cave. We looked at each other through the purple gold fence. At that time, I cried so hard that my heart was broken. I asked Sister Xiao Miao, "Why are you so stupid?" "Why? For me, it's not worth it, not worth it." Big drops of tears fell from Jiyu Du Xing's eyes. He simply picked up the wine pot and poured it into his mouth. Tears and wine dripped into his mouth. Chu Yang sighed and silently picked up another pot of wine. Bang! The empty pot of wine was placed on the table. Jiyu Du Xing's eyes were red. At that time, Sister Xiao Miao said, "Stupid, you are really stupid." She said, "When we were young, I treated you like a younger brother and especially loved you. So, I gave you all the good things. But when we grew up, I no longer treated you as a younger brother." When Sister Xiao Miao said this, she looked at me in a daze. Then she smiled sadly and said, "Forget it, you can leave. It's fine, I just happen to be in closed-door training. Silly brother, you are not young anymore, it's time to start a family. It's a pity that Sister Xiao Miao will not be able to drink your wedding wine. Go, go. Don't come in the future. Just treat it as if you never had a Sister Xiao Miao." Then Sister Xiao Miao turned around and walked into the dragon prison cave. Jiyu Du Xing's face was ferocious. His muscles were contorted and his whole body trembled. Sister Xiao Miao has always been like a deity in my heart. Jiyu Du Xing trembled. I liked her, I worshipped her, I. But when she walked into the dragon prison cave, I realized that my heart was empty. There was nothing left. I can't live without her. I can't live without her. Jiyu Du Xing roared and raised his head. Tears streamed down his face. But she was imprisoned in the dragon prison cave. With such a big mistake, I'm afraid that she may not be able to come out in this lifetime. What do we have to do? What kind of conditions do we have to meet before we can let her out? Find another purple cloud Ganoderma? Chu Yang's eyes darkened as he asked. It's useless. When the first Supreme Elder heard this news, he was at the crucial moment of breaking through the bottleneck. His mind was shaken and he vomited blood on the spot. His cultivation level slipped and he no longer had the chance to break through to the martial emperor realm. Besides the first supreme elder, no one else in our clan could. Then what did your foster father say? Foster father had no choice. Jiyu Du-shing stared blankly at the void in front of him. Tears streamed down his face. I lived like this for 2 years until last month, when foster father arranged a marriage for me. Chu Yang immediately understood. It seemed that this soaring dragon sword king was not only a sword maniac, but also a love maniac. No matter what, even if I'm alone for the rest of my life, I can't let Sister Xiao Miao down. Jiyu Du-shing clenched his teeth. So I escaped. No wonder this guy cultivated like a madman in his previous life and advanced so quickly. It turned out that he wanted to rely on his own strength to break through to the Sword Emperor realm and then rescue Jiyu Miaoling. Chapter 71. Even though Jiyu Du-shing's talent was heaven-defying, but by the time he became a Sword Emperor, he would be at least 10 years old. As for Jiyu Miaoling, who was bitterly suffering in the dragon prison cave, she was older than him by a year. The most beautiful days of their lives had finally been wasted away, and would never return. If I want Sister Xiao Miao to come out, I have to become a Sword Emperor, but that is so far away. Sister Xiao Miao is already 21 years old this year. Jiyu Du-shing said in despair, even if I advance quickly, it will take at least 30 to 40 years to reach that stage. 30 to 40 years, how can Sister Xiao Miao endure it? How can she endure it? Chu Yang raised his head, pondered, and said, this matter is not necessarily without a way. You have a way. Jiyu Du-shing stood up abruptly, causing the wine cup on the table to overturn and fall to the ground. A pair of blood-red eyes stared at him. Yes. Chu Yang nodded calmly and said, sit down and talk. Brother Jiyu, the onlooker sees the game clearly. You mainly cultivate with the sword, right? Brother Chu's vision is like a torch. Jiyu Du-shing's eyes flashed with amazement. He only cultivated with the sword, and never dabbled in other martial techniques. This way, he could maintain his focus, and advance at the fastest speed. However, he had never mentioned this matter to anyone before. Although he had already acknowledged this young man in front of him, he was still so young, how could he have such great vision? Besides, even if it was a martial artist who was at a higher level than him, as long as they did not fight, he would not be able to tell that he was a sword cultivator. How could he tell? You mainly cultivate with the sword, you must know that there is a saying, the sword is unconventional. Chu Yang smiled and said, the sword is unconventional, although it is easy to injure yourself, once you make a move, it will be a fatal blow. Yes, but, this is cultivation, how can I be unconventional? Jiyu Du-shing frowned and thought hard. Brother Jiyu, how many people have you killed? Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Killed? Jiyu Du-shing was surprised, and then he took a breath and said, 7. 7 bastards. Too few. Once a general succeeds, there will be mountains of bones. Not to mention this kind of heaven-defying cultivation. If you want to become a sword emperor, you have to go through countless bloody battles in your lifetime to reach that stage. Chu Yang raised his eyes. Then, he said heavily, Jiyu Du-shing, if you are willing to trust me and give me your next 10 years, I am confident that I can make you reach the sword emperor level within 10 years. 10 years. Jiyu Du-shing's eyes widened and shot out a dazzling radiance. Although 10 years wasn't short, compared to 30 to 40 years, it was much shorter. Moreover, he and Jiyu Miaoling would only be in their 30s 10 years later. So, it still wouldn't be too late. However, was this true? Chu Yang didn't say anything. He just looked at him quietly with a smile. I agree. Jiyu Du-shing said resolutely and decisively, as long as you can get Sister Xiao Miao out in the shortest time possible, not to mention 10 years, even if I have to give you a lifetime, I won't hesitate. Good. Deal. Chu Yang stretched out his hand, as long as you listen to me, I'll guarantee that you two will be reunited within 10 years. And during these 10 years, I wish us a happy cooperation in advance. Then, what do I have to do now? Jiyu Du-shing asked. If you are worried about exposing your identity, you can first change your appearance. Chu Yang said, then, What you have to do is to look after this heavenly armament pavilion for me. Look after these swords. Have a good sleep and recover your energy. In the next 10 years, blood will flow like a river under your sword. Your enemies will be all over the continent. You must struggle to survive in the crevice between life and death. You must improve yourself in every impossible moment. Only then can you meet my requirements for you. This is a difficult road. It is also a road of no return, but I believe that you have already made your preparations. For the sake of your beloved Jiyu Miaoling, hearing the 3 words Jiyu Miaoling, Jiyu Du Xing suddenly clenched his fists tightly. His throat let out a low and painful groan like a wounded beast. Only he knew that every time he thought of this name, it was like a knife piercing his heart. No way out. For Sister Xiao Miao, why would I need a way out? Chu Yang stood up and walked to the counter. He took out a piece of paper and dipped his brush in ink. After thinking for a while, he began to write something quickly. Jiyu Du Xing shook his body and stood up. He walked to Chu Yang's side and looked at what he was writing. But as he looked, his eyes suddenly widened to the size of an egg. His 2 eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Revered Berserker Sword Technique? These 4 words were said with great difficulty. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang in disbelief. Is this real? Revered Berserker Sword Technique was the fastest way to cultivate the sword. Once it was used, the user's whole body and spirit would be immersed in it. Without reaching a certain level, it would be impossible to stop. This was also the most extreme method. Either you destroy yourself in this extreme madness, or you raise your sword technique to a new level. Cultivating Revered Berserker Sword Technique, one could succeed, the other could be death. There was no third way. This sword technique was said to be created by Sword King Feng Xin hundreds of years ago. Although it was called Feng Xin, it should be called Feng Xin. Because everyone was certain that the person who created this sword art was definitely a madman. This sword technique was found in Chu Yang's previous life. In a treasure hunt, someone found Sword King Feng Xin's burial place and took out this sword technique. But after many people studied it, they found that this sword technique could increase one's sword cultivation at the fastest speed, but in the end, it would make the user crazy. Sword King Feng Heart-Sealing Sword King had gone mad and died from practicing this sword art. Countless people tried to change it into a treasure, but no one succeeded. Thus, this revered Berserker Sword Technique was thrown away. After all, no matter how powerful it would be useless if it went crazy. But the contents of this sword technique were passed down in the 3 days. Until one day, when Chu Yang found this revered Berserker Sword Technique, he carefully studied it. He found that this revered Berserker Sword Technique was similar to the 3rd fragment of the Calamity Sword, but it was of a much lower level. As long as he changed some of the important parts of the revered Berserker Sword Technique, he could cultivate it as usual. And it would still reach the extreme of crazy speed. But the power of this revered Berserker Sword Technique was not only one level lower than the Calamity Sword Technique, so although Chu Yang found it, he did not cultivate it. It was just that he had a deep impression of it at that time. But now, it came in handy. The current Jiyu Du Xing desperately needed this sword technique. And for this guy who was obsessed with the sword to the point of madness, he was the most suitable person for this sword technique. Take it. After Chu Yang finished writing the last stroke, he picked it up and blew on the glistening handwriting before handing it over to Jiyu Duxing. This was the improved revered Berserker Sword Technique. What was needed to cultivate this was tenacity and indomitable willpower. Jiyu Du Xing's hands trembled violently as he took the sword technique. These few thin pieces of paper had given him the hope of rescuing Jiyu Miaoling ahead of time. Chapter 72. Just now, when Chu Yang said that he could help him realize the Leduo in advance, Jiyu Duxing was only half convinced and half doubtful. Moreover, he had the thought of isn't it the same to run away from marriage and cultivate. But now, he was already convinced without a doubt. This sword technique can guarantee that you will break through to revered sword artist within a year, but you will only be able to break through to revered sword artist before you stop. Otherwise, if you continue, your mind will still be bewitched by the sword technique and fall into madness. Chu Yang said slowly, his eyes shining with a sharp light. When you break through to revered sword artist, we have other ways. The path of cultivation needs to be taken step by step. I believe you understand this principle. Enough, enough. Jiu Duxing said shakily, thank you. Thank you. He would never have thought that when he was at the end of his rope, such a big gift would fall from the sky. For the current Jiu Duxing, Chu Yang's existence was like a life-saving straw. It was his only hope to save Sister Xiao Miao. Jiu Duxing would rather die 10,000 times than give up this opportunity. Chu Yang smiled, and finally relaxed. By doing this, he was of course keeping Jiu Duxing alive at the root. But the biggest reason was the relationship between Jiu Duxing and Jiu Miaoling. Because such a relationship touched the softest part of Chu Yang's heart. Mo Qingwu. Such deep feelings, he could not let them down, and infatuated girls like Mo Qingwu and Jiu Miaoling, he could not let them down. At this moment, someone outside the door asked, "Excuse me, is there anyone inside?" The two of them looked at each other. Then, they suddenly screamed and jumped up. These two guys, from morning till now, only cared about themselves drinking and chatting. They did not have the awareness that businessmen should have. Heavenly Armament Pavilion was already late in the morning, but it was still not open for business. I'll open the door, you tidy up. Chu Yang was about to leave, but before he could finish his sentence, Jiu Duxing had already jumped up, holding the revered berserker sword technique that he treasured like a treasure, and ran into his own room. Fuck. Chu Yang was stunned. With a shua sound, he hurriedly put away the dripping wine on the table. With a hua lolo sound, he picked up the table and threw it behind him. Then he clapped his hands and walked over to open the door. The smell of alcohol rushed out as he opened the door. Cough cough. There was a burst of coughing in front of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. There was a young girl patiently waiting. But, she couldn't help but frown when she felt this aura. Hey! Are you here to buy a sword? Chu Yang raised his eyebrows slightly. Even with Chu Yang's experience, he didn't know how to describe this girl in front of him. She was definitely not the kind of peerless beauty that would shock people at first sight. Whether it was her nose, mouth, or eyes, they were all very ordinary. But beyond the extreme ordinariness, there was a strange charm. If you only look at her once and then brush past her, I'm afraid she won't leave any impression in your heart. However, if you looked at her a few more times, you would immediately discover that this young girl was filled with too many differences. The facial features on his face seemed to be clear at a glance, but after looking at it for a long time, there was a feeling that it was becoming more and more misty. Her eyes were misty and dreamy. Her expression was indifferent and calm. She was clearly a woman, but she seemed to have the demeanor of an insufferably arrogant general. Standing in front of the door, although she looked delicate and weak, she gave people the feeling that she was as tall as a mountain. Yuan. Towering mountain, unshakable. She stood alone in front of the door of Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It seemed that she had been here for a while. Chu Yang hadn't opened the door for a long time, but she wasn't anxious or impatient. Her expression was tranquil and calm. She was clearly only a 17 or 18-year-old girl, but she gave people the feeling that she was extremely experienced. Almost at the first sight of her, Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. It was as if he had seen her before. May I ask, are you the shopkeeper of Heavenly Armament Pavilion? The young girl's clear eyes looked at Chu Yang's face. Yes, may I know why you are here? Well, I'm here to see if your so-called Heavenly Armament Pavilion is worthy of its name. The young girl said indifferently, a customer is here, why don't you invite me in? Hey, if you want to come in, have you seen the notice at the door? Don't worry, gold and silver are not a problem. It's not like we don't have any treasures. Haha, but when you open the door to do business, I have to see your goods. I want to see if they are as magical as you boast. If they aren't worth it, I naturally won't spend money. The young girl put her hands behind her back and walked into Heavenly Armament Pavilion. That kind of natural and relaxed manner was as if she was walking into her own backyard with her hands behind her back. Chu Yang frowned. This young girl had an indescribable aura. Of all the women he had seen in his previous life and this life, none of them had this kind of special quality. She was really an anomaly. This is the heavenly armament pavilion you were talking about? The young girl stood in front of the 4 weapons hanging on the wall with her hands behind her back and looked up slightly. She just looked at them with her hands behind her back and didn't do anything else. She just lifted her chin slightly, but for some reason, Chu Yang suddenly had a feeling that she was giving directions. It was like a king inspecting his territory and his people. Chu Yang was even more confused. She was obviously a girl. Why did he have this kind of feeling? Yes. A voice came out, but it wasn't Chu Yang's. Jiyu Du Xing quietly appeared in the corner, looking at the young girl with cold eyes. His face had changed slightly, but his face was like an ice sculpture. It was still the same zombie-like face. He didn't have the slightest pretense because the other party was a girl. Can I take a look? The young girl didn't seem surprised that another person appeared out of nowhere. He just asked indifferently. To buy a sword from here, it doesn't look at your status or your wealth, but it depends on you. Jiyu Du Xing said coldly, you don't deserve the swords here. If you don't, then even if you have enough wealth, you won't be able to take it away. Oh, the sword is looking for a master. I see. The young girl said softly and said slowly, but, you want to choose a person, but I want to choose a sword. If the sword is not good, even if you kneel down and beg me, I won't take it. This sentence was tit for tat with Jiyu Du Xing's words. Then, the young girl stretched out her hand and took the long sword from the wall. Holding it in her hand, she obviously didn't expect the sword to be so heavy. It was almost 3 times heavier than a normal long sword. Her arm sank slightly before she could hold it firmly. Her face showed a trace of surprise. Long sword. Chu Yang and Jiyu Du Xing looked at each other and felt surprised. Normally, if a girl chose a sword, she would choose a light and nimble sword. That short sword was obviously more beautiful and elegant than this long sword. It was suitable for a girl to wear. But this long sword was rough and unruly, full of a man's masculinity. The two didn't expect that the first thing this girl looked at was this long sword. Then, with a clang, the long sword was unsheathed. A ray of light shot out. The girl squinted her eyes and praised, "Good sword." Then, she slowly pulled the whole sword out of the scabbard. Her arm stretched forward, and the sword was slightly tilted in front of her eyes, looking at it at eye level. Just by looking at this tilted angle, Chu Yang and Jiyu Du Xing realized at the same time that this girl must be an expert. Although she wasn't necessarily an expert in swordsmanship, but in terms of appreciation, she might not be inferior to the two of them. Chu Yang racked his brains, thinking of all the girls he met in his previous life and this life, but there was no one who fit the unique requirements of the girl in front of him. Although Jiyu Du Xing's expression didn't change, he also thought of the girls from the big clans in the past 3 days. He found that even those girls might not be as graceful as the girl in front of him. Chapter 73. The body of the sword flashed with a soft light. It was as if the surface of the sword was rippling back and forth. The young girl held the sword in one hand and flicked her finger with the other. A wisp of wind from her finger silently hit the body of the sword. The long sword trembled and suddenly let out a sound like a dragon's cry. It resonated loudly and endlessly. "It really is a divine weapon," the young girl praised. She then put the long sword back into the scabbard and picked up the saber. After looking at all 4 weapons, she raised her head and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang looked on coldly. This young girl's expression from beginning to end was very calm. Even when she saw the rare treasured sword, her eyes did not change in the slightest. The expected shock, surprise, greed, reluctance, and other emotions were not in this young girl's eyes at all. It was as if she had just looked at it and that was it. Everything was so normal. Chu Yang could not help but be a little shocked. This kind of state of mind, this kind of cultivation, is this still a young girl? What price? The young girl seemed to be thinking about something. When she asked this question, she was a little absent-minded. Chu Yang was thinking about the identity of this young girl. Looking at her, her every movement had an air of arrogance. It was as if ordering people around was a habit of hers. Her whole body also had an indescribable air of nobility. He thought to himself, looks like she is definitely a noble. Even if she is not a direct subordinate of the royal family, she must be a princess of a royal family. But the strange thing is, why does such a person come out without any guards? This is really strange. Could it be that the security of Iron Cloud Citadel is this good? Jiyu Duxing came and was like this, and now a young girl came. It was actually like this again. Also, since Chu Yang put up the sign of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, he was prepared for people to come and cause trouble. He wanted to take advantage of the situation to make a big fuss and then use the limelight to make a name for himself. He wanted to use his divine sword to create the biggest wave of public opinion in Ironcloud Citadel and stand at the heart of the storm. Who would have thought that besides a little hoodlum who came to cause trouble on the opening day, no one else came to visit? Those hedonistic young masters, unruly young girls, aristocrats who used their power to bully others, and relatives of the royal family who used their connections to intimidate others didn't appear. In the capital of Ironcloud Nation, which could easily kick out 3 people like that, it was as if they had disappeared without a trace. This was too strange. 100,000 taels of gold for each. Or, take out some precious treasures that can be exchanged, like 7-star white magnolia, spirit ginseng, empty spirit purple zorizir, 10,000 years yellow essence, and so on. If you really can't do it, then purple crystal jade, mysterious gold iron, star steel, nightmare silver, and diamond sand are also fine. If I approve of them, you can take them away. Chu Yang looked at this girl with an amused expression. She clearly didn't have any gold or silver with her, and she reported an astronomical figure. Even for a single country, this number was still enormous. These conditions were exactly what the sword spirit had told him about. Website www.moudel.com. Now that he said it word for word, this girl was really shocked. Even though her mental strength was outstanding, far surpassing that of ordinary people, but the other party's exorbitant demand still made her a little angry. Even the zombie-faced Jiyu Duxing, who had been clamoring that these 4 swords couldn't be sold, suddenly opened his mouth wide. This kind of price, robbery was no longer enough to describe it. You should just go and rob the national treasury, you just don't want to sell, right? The girl's eyes were cold as she looked at Chu Yang. She said what was in Jiyu Duxing's heart. Chu Yang smiled and took out an ingot of glistening gold. The next moment, the sword was in his hand. With a bang, the ingot was thrown on the table, and the long sword chopped down like a knife. With a few slashing sounds, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. Under the girl's incredulous gaze, the ingot of gold turned into pieces of gold in the blink of an eye. It scattered on the table, shining with a golden light. Then, Chu Yang's right hand grabbed the several hundred-pound iron block that was leaning against the door. The long sword was suspended above the iron block, and his hand loosened. The sword tip was pointed down, and it calmly fell. With a slashing sound, the long sword silently stabbed into the iron block, and half of the sword's body was inserted. Only a foot-long sword blade was left, swaying slightly, and emitting a soft light. The girl's eyes revealed a look of shock. Is it worth it? Chu Yang crossed his arms and asked with a smile. The girl looked straight at the sword, and her eyes shone with a fervent light. It was true that Iron Cloud lacked divine weapons, but she would never have thought that the weapon in front of her would be a weapon that only existed in legend. Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It was indeed worthy of its name, and fully deserved. Worth it. This kind of divine sword is simply a priceless treasure. No matter how much it costs, it is worth it. A voice suddenly boomed. Following this voice, a burly figure appeared behind the girl. The moment this voice sounded, Chu Yang and Jiyu Duxing looked at each other in shock, because, even with their spiritual senses, they didn't notice when this person came. Didn't this mean that this person's cultivation level was at least beyond martial great master? The person who came was tall and sturdy, with a square face. His eyes were gentle but sharp, thick eyebrows, a straight nose, and 3 strands of black beard fluttering in the wind. He just stood there, but his broad shoulders gave people the feeling that he was holding up the entire world. From his body, there was a kind of aura that could repel 1,000 soldiers. There was no need for any self-introduction. Chu Yang and Jiyu Duxing recognized this person. In this world, Besides the number one general, Tai Long Cheng, there was no one else who could have this kind of spirit. Only Tai Long Cheng was able to stand with his back straight and give off the feeling of an impenetrable defense against 10,000 soldiers. The number one general of Iron Cloud's military, one of the two pillars of Iron Cloud Nation, the god of war of the Chongqian continent, Tai Long Cheng. At the same time, Chu Yang realized that the entire street had suddenly quieted down. It was so quiet that it was abnormal and strange. He didn't know when, but a group of elite soldiers had already sealed off the entire street. The originally bustling street was now so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. At the entrance of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, there were 4 people standing on each side. Their eyes were emotionless as they looked inside the shop. Although he didn't see anything, Chu Yang knew that the back window and the roof were already filled with people, and they were all experts. It really is a good sword. Tai Long Cheng's cold eyes glanced at the swaying sword. He immediately turned his head and looked at the girl. His expression softened. "Why are you here?" Then he asked, "Why are you here alone?" "I came to take a look." The girl smiled calmly. "I am very curious about this Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Where are your guards?" Tai Long Cheng's thick eyebrows furrowed. His eyes were cold. "Those guys, what are they doing? They are absolute bastards. They actually let you come out alone? When I get back, I will capture them all and feed them to the dogs. I sneaked out by myself. It has nothing to do with them." The girl grabbed Tai Long Cheng's shoulder and shook it. She begged, "Second uncle, I only have this little secret. I only have this little way to relax." Tai Long Cheng let out a long sigh. He looked at the girl with eyes full of love and regret. It seemed that he no longer wanted to pursue this matter. He turned his head and asked Chu Yang, "Little guy, these 2 swords and sabers, I will buy them." Chu Yang was startled. He squinted his eyes and asked, "What will you use to buy them?" Chapter 74. Hearing these words, the black-clothed men at the door immediately turned around. Chu Yang could only feel waves of cold murderous aura locking onto him. Tai Long Cheng's words were like a breakthrough, breaking through the dam of murderous aura. Beside Chu Yang, another wave of murderous aura erupted like a flash flood, sweeping across the area. This wave of murderous aura was even purer and sharper. Fighting 1 against 4, he was actually not at a disadvantage. It was Jiyu Du Xing who was quietly standing beside Chu Yang. Jiyu Du Xing's hand was already on the hilt of his sword. His eyes were already emitting a dazzling light that could only be emitted from his entire body. Intimidating, yet calm. Jiyu Du Xing's murderous aura and the 4 men's murderous aura surged together. Suddenly, the entire shop felt as if it had fallen into an ice cave. The cold aura filled half the street. In Jiyu Du Xing's eyes, no matter what these people in front of him were, no matter what power they had, the lower 3 heavens was still the lower 3 heavens. The lower 3 heavens could never be compared to the upper 3 heavens. Not to mention a general, even if it was an emperor. So what? Chu Yang was his biggest reliance to save Sister Xiao Miao, and also his only hope. If these people wanted to deal with Chu Yang, then they would have to step over his dead body. "No matter what, as long as you dare to make a move, then I will dare to kill you." Tai Long Cheng looked at Jiyu Du Xing in surprise. He waved his hand behind him, and the 4 men's murderous aura immediately disappeared without a trace. Jiyu Du Xing snorted and withdrew his aura, returning to his cold zombie face. He stood behind Chu Yang, motionless. The 4 men opposite him also withdrew their murderous aura, each of them cautiously looking at Jiyu Du Xing. This kind of murderous aura, and such a young man at that, gave the 4 men a huge impact. Not bad. Tai Long Cheng praised, but it was not clear whether he was praising Jiyu Du Xing or the sword. He looked at Chu Yang and slowly said, "You have only opened for 3 days, and your shop has already faced the crisis of being closed dozens of times. You should know that if I did not give the order, your shop and even you would have already turned into ashes." "Why?" Chu Yang secretly gritted his teeth, thinking, "I was wondering why no one came to cause trouble." "So it was you, old man, playing tricks in the dark. Old man, you ruined the young master's plan, and you still want to report for the heavenly army." Tai Long Cheng suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang, you can come up with such a name and openly erect such a signboard on Ironcloud Nation's first street. This shows that you are very scheming. Moreover, you are very far-sighted. You have grasped the real weakness of Ironcloud. This old man wanted to see just what kind of intentions you had. Otherwise, a small shop like yours, even if it is filled with divine weapons, is not worthy of this old man's condescension. What intentions? Hearing these words, the girl beside him couldn't help but raise her head and look at Chu Yang. That's right, this person harbors ill intentions. However, if you only have ulterior motives, then you are not worthy of my visit. Tai Long Cheng clasped his hands behind his back. I have my own reasons for coming here today. Furthermore, before that, he had to stop anyone who was interested in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. No matter who it was, as long as people came, the shop owner could smoothly rely on these people to achieve his goal. Although this old man doesn't know what he's plotting, a direct blockade can indeed prevent any plot from having the time and space to display its power. This shop is not here to sell weapons, it is here to cause trouble. Tai Long Cheng coldly hammered the final word. Chu Yang's true intentions were almost revealed. A direct blockade is the simplest and most effective method. If it was another time, I would have let him go for a while. However, Diwu Qingru has begun to deploy troops in the southwest. At this moment, I cannot let him go. Chu Yang's heart trembled. On his back, he could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Who said that everyone in the world was stupid? This Tai Long Cheng was simply too terrifying. He did not know of Chu Yang's plan, but a simple blockade was enough to completely destroy Chu Yang's plan. There was no more follow-up. Diwu Qingru's plan against Ironcloud Nation began 10 years ago. 10 years ago, a large number of assassins suddenly infiltrated Ironcloud. These people did not assassinate nobles, generals, but they killed all of Ironcloud's famous blacksmiths one by one. 10 years ago, there was a storm of blood. Tai Long Cheng's eyes became as sharp as a needle. Until now, in the records of the government, it is still a mystery. All of the blacksmiths who were skilled in forging and could make high-quality weapons were all killed. Then, the blacksmiths in the army also mysteriously died one by one. From top to bottom, more than 30,000 blacksmiths died. Especially the blacksmiths who were at the Great Master level, none of them were spared. The entire Ironcloud Nation had the richest mines in the entire continent, but it became a desert for blacksmith. Such a hilarious thing actually happened just like that. Tai Long Cheng snorted and said, the despicable Ministry of Justice only treated this as an ordinary case. They hastily dealt with it. In the end, 3 of Great Zhao's largest blacksmiths and 17 domestic and foreign weapons suppliers were uprooted. Only then did they realize that this matter had shaken the foundation of the nation. But at that time, it was too late to regret. The most tragic thing was that the blacksmiths were killed. Even the places where they lived were burned to the ground. Their life's work was all destroyed in one day. Those precious experiences that could be passed down could be counted on one's fingers. Chu Yang's mind was shaken as he listened. Ironcloud Nation became a blacksmithing desert because of this matter. Diwu Qingru's move to remove the firewood from under the cauldron was indeed extremely vicious. Moreover, only a few blacksmiths died. In the beginning, it was not enough to arouse the suspicions of the higher-ups of Ironcloud. However, by the time they realized it, this massacre had already come to an end. Tens of thousands of lives were destroyed for the sake of Diwu Qingru's ambition. However, there was no evidence. This kind of ruthless method was truly shocking. Moreover, after this massacre, even after Great Zhao unified Ironcloud, there was no need to worry about any rebellions within Ironcloud. How many blacksmiths could a country have? Because Ironcloud was a mining hub, there were tens of thousands of skilled blacksmiths. However, after this massacre, how many would be left? Even the young and strong men who originally wanted to become blacksmiths would give up after this massacre. The key to mobilizing troops was the word mobilizing troops. The word troops did not only refer to soldiers, but also to weapons. Without weapons, what would they use to rebel? With 2 hands. Wasn't this a joke? This kind of thing made Chu Yang's hair stand on end. These were tens of thousands of lives, not tens of thousands of pieces of wood. Moreover, they were all commoners. This was a pure and inhumane massacre. How cruel, unscrupulous, and insane was the person who gave such an order. Moreover, not long after this incident, Great Zhao began to fight under the leadership of Diwu Qingru. Great Zhao and Iron Cloud were at war frequently. Naturally, the soldiers' weapons could not meet the demand. However, at this time, Iron Cloud did not have blacksmiths who could create elite weapons. This incident seemed to be nothing more than an inhumane massacre. Who would have thought that it would affect the outcome of the war between two great countries? When the war started, there were frequent killings. Iron Cloud had the richest mines in the world. They had an inexhaustible supply of iron, but they could not create top-notch weapons. If the weapons of the generals were damaged, they would not be able to find a suitable weapon. They could only use the swords of ordinary soldiers. Ordinary soldiers were not in any danger because they used ordinary swords. However, who would have thought that the enemy's actions of massacring the lowest-level blacksmiths was to deal with the generals of Iron Cloud? Tai Long Cheng roared and shouted. A person who could use 80 pounds of weapons was forced to use 7 or 8 pounds of swords. Moreover, when the swords collided with the enemy's weapons, they would break. How could their fighting strength only drop by one level? This is one of the major reasons why Iron Cloud could only protect itself for so many years. It could not eradicate external threats, let alone attack. On the battlefield, the soldiers used inferior swords and rode their horses to fight the enemy. After one collision, their swords and spears broke. How comical was this? How many heroes have died so tragically at the hands of opponents who were inferior to them? Thus, the entire Iron Cloud nation was forced to retreat. The soldiers wanted to kill the enemy, but they were powerless to reverse the situation. They could only watch as the surrounding 7 states and 48 counties fell into Great Zhao's territory. This also gave rise to Diwu Qingru's unparalleled reputation. In these 8 years, Iron Cloud Nation relaxed all the requirements for blacksmiths, but it still could not make up for the losses of these 8 years. Moreover, the brothers who died in battle will never come back. The quality of weapons is Iron Cloud Nation's biggest weakness. Now, you actually opened Heavenly Armament Pavilion in the most prosperous street of Iron Cloud Citadel? Chapter 75. Hearing Tai Long Cheng's words, the girl's eyes suddenly became as sharp as swords as she stared at Chu Yang. Tai Long Cheng took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "When I heard the words Heavenly Armament Pavilion, the first thing that came to my mind was my comrades who died in battle, my brothers who died without even their bones remaining. Do you know how many people died in front of me with a look of helplessness, and disbelief? They were the heroes of my Iron Cloud." Chu Yang finally understood why this #1 general personally came to Iron Cloud City and why he gave the order to seal off Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It turned out that his actions had touched the deepest wound in his heart. Even though Tai Long Cheng spoke calmly, Chu Yang could still see and feel that this legendary general's heart was filled with grief and indignation. Chu Yang always knew that Iron Cloud Nation was a barren land for blacksmiths. High-quality weapons were basically bought from Limitless Nation at a high price. But he really did not know that there was such an inhumane thing going on here. General Tai's eyes are really sharp. Chu Yang smiled calmly. "So, you admit that you are a spy sent by Diwu Qingru?" "Admit?" Chu Yang smiled. "If I was really a subordinate of Diwu Qingru, how could I use such a blatant method to be a spy?" Tai Long Cheng stared at him for a while, then suddenly said coldly, "But, there is always a reason for everything. I don't like the look of Diwu Qingru, is this reason enough?" Chu Yang smiled. Suddenly, his body flashed, and he was at the door. He punched one of the 4 guards. This attack came without any warning. It was a clean hit. One moment, he was smiling at Tai Long Cheng, and the next moment, his fist was at the guard's throat. That person was shocked. He quickly turned around and 3 swords came out of their scabbards at the same time. They were like poisonous snakes stabbing at Chu Yang. The 4 of them were experts themselves, and the tacit understanding between them was even more natural. When one person was attacked, the other 3 attacked at the same time. Chu Yang let out a long laugh. His fingers suddenly moved, and a pair of fleshy palms went up to meet the sword and saber that were glittering with cold light. With 3 soft sounds, the most unbelievable thing happened. One of Chu Yang's fingers met with the 3 swords, and a section of the sword that had killed countless enemies was silently broken. When the 2 guards saw that Chu Yang had caught the sword with his bare hands, a trace of cruelty appeared in their eyes. It was as if he had already seen the tragic scene of his finger being separated from his palm, and his flesh and blood flying everywhere. However, he did not expect that when his finger touched the sword, it would be the sword that broke. No one had thought that something like this would happen. They couldn't help but be stunned. Chu Yang's finger had already stopped at the throat of the previous person. She pinched his protruding Adam's apple softly, or even very gently. Then, his figure flashed and reappeared in front of Tai Long Cheng. The 4 revered martial artists looked at Chu Yang with shock in their eyes. When a person's hand collided with a sharp sword, the sword was actually cut in half. Was this still a body of flesh and blood? Especially the guard whose Adam's apple was pinched by Chu Yang, he felt a chill all over his body. If Chu Yang had used a little bit of strength, his Adam's apple would have been broken. Tai Long Cheng said that Chu Yang was a spy, and Chu Yang could not prove that he was not. Therefore, when encountering such an inexplicable situation, the only way to explain it, the best way to explain it, and also the most effective way to explain it, was strength. There is another reason, and that is that I can easily assassinate you. Is this reason enough? Also, Chu Yang smiled and picked up the broken sword from the ground. Then, he used his own sword to cut the sword into pieces as if he was cutting a carrot. This is the value of a heavenly weapon. Is this value enough? In a split second, everyone looked at Chu Yang with shock in their eyes. Assassinate me, not necessarily. Easily assassinate me, is not something you can do. Although you are confident, there are some things in the world that cannot be done with confidence alone. However, the fact that you don't like Diwu Qingru is enough. Tai Long Cheng's hawk-like eyes looked at Chu Yang. After a while, he suddenly laughed. The other 2 reasons are not important. After a pause, he said again, so small. Although he was surprised by Chu Yang's strange yet powerful strength, he did not lose his composure. Tai Long Cheng was even more confident that if Chu Yang attacked him, it would not be so easy. Chu Yang's action this time was due to the power of Calamity Sword. When the sword tip of Calamity Sword was in his hand, it was naturally invincible. Moreover, the moment his finger touched the sword's iron essence was absorbed by Calamity Sword. Chu Yang's finger was like touching a piece of wood, and it was rotten wood. Otherwise, even if Chu Yang's sword was made of iron essence, it would not have been able to cut through iron as if it was mud. After all, the swords of the 4 bodyguards were not ordinary. Although they were not at the level of heavenly weapons, their degree of toughness was far beyond that of ordinary sword. However, this gave Tai Long Cheng and the others an extraordinary shock. Then, I want to know your true purpose. Tai Long Cheng laughed for a while and said in a deep voice. True purpose. Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, I have no enmity with Diwu Qingru, but I do not want him to win. I do not want him to unify the world. Because of Tai Long Cheng's blockade, Chu Yang did not have the opportunity to directly contact Tai Bu Tian. However, Tai Long Cheng personally came here. Although he personally sealed Chu Yang's shop, he also gave Chu Yang an opportunity. Because he personally came, Chu Yang had already shown his strength and capital. The next moment, he showed his wisdom. Even if he directly met Tai Bu Tian, Tai Long Cheng's attitude was crucial. I believe that no one here is willing to let that schemer Diwu Qingru succeed. Tai Long Cheng smiled gently. Chu Yang's display of strength this time, at least on the surface, seemed to have made Tai Long Cheng somewhat relieved. Chu Yang smiled and said, but now, if Iron Cloud wants to defeat Diwu Qingru, it is basically a delusion. It is absolutely impossible to succeed. Why do you say that? This time, the girl pondered and asked. Tai Long Cheng smiled indifferently and did not speak. He only listened quietly. His fierce aura from a moment ago had been completely restrained. First, Diwu Qingru's army is powerful. Great Zhao's armored soldiers are close to 1 million. The continent's top 10 generals, from 2nd to 7th, are all in Great Jiao. Each one of them is a hero of the world. Ironclad only has 2, 1st and 10th. We should all know that this kind of ranking of generals is not something to be said casually. It is something that is achieved through countless battles of life and death. Everyone's path to becoming a famous general involves hundreds of thousands of lives. Chu Yang quickly recalled the information from his previous life. Second, although Great Jiao is nominally ruled by a monarch, the actual power is in the hands of Diwu Qingru alone. Moreover, Diwu Qingru's intelligence network far surpasses that of Ironclad and Wuji combined. Diwu Qingru's Golden Horse Riders Department has never appeared in front of people, but Golden Horse Riders Department is full of talented people. Moreover, their fighting strength has reached an unimaginable level. There are more than 8,000 elite soldiers in there. This news was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in the hearts of Tai Longcheng and the girl. Golden Horse Riders Department. You also know about Golden Horse Riders Department. Tai Longcheng frowned and waved his hand. His expression became serious for the first time. Immediately, the soldiers outside retreated a few dozen feet. The entire street was silent. Except for a few personal bodyguards, there was not a single person within a few dozen feet of the area. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Countless experts rushed up and sealed off the entire roof. Heavenly Armament Pavilion's shop immediately became the heart of the entire city. Even birds would not be able to enter. It was clear that Tai Longcheng attached great importance to this news. However, the strange thing was that the girl, who obviously had nothing to do with these national affairs, was not driven out by Tai Longcheng. Instead, he acquiesced to her existence. Chapter 76. The young girl suddenly turned her head and looked at Tai Longcheng. Her eyes were as sharp as a sword and as cold as ice. However, as he pondered, the sharpness in his eyes gradually disappeared. 8 years ago, His Majesty was hit by a poison arrow and his life was at stake. He was too young, he was only 10 years old at that time. Although he was intelligent, he could not convince the public. The entire Ironclad nation was on the verge of collapse. All the ministers had their own thoughts. The situation was very dangerous. Tai Longcheng slowly said. Moreover, Chu Yang had a feeling that he seemed to be explaining. Chu Yang thought that since it was the first time they met, he did not have the qualifications to explain. Even if he did, there was no need for him to explain. He could not help but feel suspicious. Tai Longcheng continued, then, on the battlefield, Diwu Qingru suddenly made a few unnecessary and incomprehensible mistakes. He buried a few experienced generals of Great Jiao on the battlefield. Those few battles were unnecessary losses for the Great Jiao Empire, and they were also losses that were impossible to occur. Because at that time, as long as they attacked with all their forces, Ironclad would have been destroyed within half a year. Ironclad would have been powerless to reverse the situation. But at that critical moment, a few generals suddenly rushed into a death trap because of the wrong information, allowing us to easily destroy them. Those 3 decisive battles gave Ironclad a chance to take a breather. After that, when we gathered together and looked back at those 3 battles, we found that we did not make any effort to make them fall into a trap. In other words, they were seeking their own deaths. Such a fact has left us inexplicably astonished. After that, Great Jiao reorganized their army for a month. And during that 1 month, there was no need to rest and reorganize. It was as if they were intentionally giving us time to breathe and think. Tai Longcheng took a deep breath and said, until we analyzed the intelligence of Great Jiao several times, we discovered that this was Diwu Qingru's plot. But this scheme forced us to cooperate. We could not help but be led by the nose. Diwu Qingru needs a long and drawn-out war. He needs to continuously accumulate military exploits, eliminate dissidents, promote his confidants, and control the entire military and government in his own hands. At that time, our Ironclad needed more time than Diwu Qingru. We needed more time to consolidate our domestic military and government into a fist. Because at that time, it was already a crisis, and life and death were on the line. If we do not cooperate, Ironclad Nation will be destroyed within a few months. But even if we do not cooperate, Diwu Qingru still has other opportunities. For example, the limitless nation. Therefore, we have no choice. Even if this is a disgrace, I can only pinch my nose and swallow it. Tai Longcheng let out a long sigh. Although he didn't continue to speak, Chu Yang and the others already understood. At that time, the commanders of the two countries, under this tacit understanding, jointly carried out their own methods of eliminating dissidents and unifying the country. You fight for your military exploits, I fight for my territory, you eliminate your dissidents, I kill my enemies. In short, the goal of the two was the same, to consolidate the power of the entire country into a fist that they could use all of their strength. If Diwu Qingru fought a decisive battle at that time, he would naturally win. This was a matter of certainty. But after the victory, he would have to face the fear of the emperor and the suspicion of the ministers. At that time, his foundation was not stable. The worst result would be dying without a burial place. Even if he could save his life and maintain a certain status, he would forever lose the opportunity to reach the peak of power. With Diwu Qingru's wild ambition, how could he give up under such a favorable situation? Therefore, he could not. At that time, the entire Iron Cloud nation was in the hands of Tai Longcheng. In a precarious situation, he did not even need the enemy to attack him to collapse. Tai Longcheng naturally did not want to fight a decisive battle. The commanders of the two countries did not even meet each other. But from thousands of miles away, they carried out a cooperation that reached a terrifying level of tacit understanding. The two restricted each other and weighed each other. Today, you win one battle and kill my enemy. Tomorrow, I win one battle and remove your obstacles. During that time, the millions of soldiers fighting between the two countries became a game controlled by two people behind the scene. On one side, millions of dead souls created Diwu Qingru's unparalleled reputation. On the other side, millions of dead souls condensed into Iron Cloud. However, this game was to buy time and fight for qualifications. But for the two sides, the starting point was completely different. Diwu Qingru was doing this for Great Zhao and for himself. However, Tai Longcheng had managed to break Iron Cloud apart in this humiliating and continuous campaign. Then, he had reformed Iron Cloud from a pile of loose sand. Now, he had become a mighty city that had the strength to fight a war. If it were not for Tai Longcheng and Diwu Qingru's precise cooperation, Iron Cloud Nation would not have lasted until now. Not to mention waiting for Bu Tiantai to regain power and compete with Diwu Qingru. All these changes were really unimaginable. Moreover, at every step, the commanders of the two sides must give each other a hint that only the other side could understand. Then, each side could take what they wanted. But such hints could not be seen by others. In this situation, the amount of brainpower needed was simply unimaginable. Chu Yang could not figure out how Tai Longcheng was able to do this. Under Diwu Qingru's leadership, he cooperated but did not allow the other side to achieve their goal. Moreover, under the other side's inescapable net, he gradually built up Iron Cloud's resistance. Until now, the border had become an impenetrable wall. This person's calculation ability, leadership ability, control ability, military ability, and even political ability were not as good as Diwu Qingru's. But the difference was very small. The two were mortal enemies, but in the midst of fighting each other, each managed their own rear, and it was flawless. These two people were really terrifying. However, there was one thing that made Chu Yang's heart turn cold. Tai Longcheng and Diwu Qingru's military expedition is tantamount to throwing away millions of soldiers on both sides as if they are lifeless chess pieces. However, those are millions of lives. There was never a moment like this where Chu Yang understood the meaning of the phrase "a general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. Do you regret it? The one who said this was Jiu Duxing. His two cold eyes looked at Tai Longcheng. Millions of soldiers were buried on the battlefield under the cooperation of the two commanders. Not even their bones were left. Chapter 77. Regret. I, Tai Longcheng, do not regret it. Dying on the battlefield is the fate of a soldier. Tai Longcheng's eyes were steady as if he was looking into nothingness. Even though this old man is grieving, I will not regret it. Grieving? Gu Duxing sneered. Did you feel any sorrow or regret when you personally sent these good men to their deaths, one by one, to be slaughtered by the enemy? You should know that the generals were at fault and were not of the same mind as you, but the soldiers were innocent. You could have used another method to save the soldiers. Gu Duxing really could not imagine that in this world, there was such a thing. The more good men, the more iron-blooded they were, the more they were sacrificed and the more they were abandoned. What kind of bullshit theory was this? And the people who did such a ridiculous thing were the top officials of two great nations. Two people who were supposed to benefit the people had become two cruel executioners who had personally sent millions of good men in their own countries to their death. If I did not do this, how could I gain Diwu Qingru's trust? Even though this old man is grieving for these dead soldiers, I have no regret. Tai Longcheng said coldly, their deaths saved millions of people of Iron Cloud. If they did not die, Iron Cloud would have become Great Zhao's territory 8 years ago. All of Iron Cloud's men and women would have become slaves. They would have been humiliated and bullied by others. I, Tai Longcheng, did such a thing that angered the heavens, but I do not regret it. In the history books of the future, when the truth of these 8 years is revealed, I, Tai Longcheng, will be a sinner, but I have no regrets. If I could do it all over again, I would still make the same choice. If I, Tai Longcheng, had surrendered and allowed Great Zhao to invade, I would have suffered some losses, but it would not have been too big. In Iron Cloud, I was a prince, a marshal. In Great Zhao, even if I was not a prince, I would still be a duke. Even if I was not a marshal, I would not be under one person, but I would not fall to the point where I would be humiliated. Even Diwu Qingru would not dare. And now, this old man has to bear this eternal infamy, but what about it? Tai Longcheng smiled, someone has to bear this infamy. As long as Iron Cloud is safe, this old man is the best person to bear this infamy. But this infamy is not easy to bear. Chu Yang snorted and said, since the two of you are cooperating so closely, then let's take advantage of each other in this kind of cooperation. Tai Longcheng's body stiffened. His eyes suddenly emitted a sharp light. He looked at Chu Yang, but didn't say anything. 8 whole years. After 8 years of fighting, both sides suffered heavy casualties. Naturally, they needed more fresh blood. And these people would definitely use their victories to climb to a high position. But, this was also the best time to arrange for a condom. I don't believe that you, Marshal Tai, didn't do that. Tai Longcheng's face was cold, he did not speak or move. I also believe that Diwu Qingru has already arranged his men in Iron Cloud and Chapter. Moreover, even though you have a scheming mind, understand tactics, and can see through the battle situation to fight for the greatest benefits for your side, you also have a view of the overall situation. But you are not like Diwu Qingru, who is a successful schemer and politician. Therefore, I believe that. Chu Yang smiled, but the words he said made Tai Longcheng's whole body turn cold. If you were in Great Zhao, there would definitely be more than 100 spies. A difference of 10 times. He paused and said, I am talking about the military, the general who leads the troops. Tai Longcheng sighed softly. Therefore, on the surface, Iron Cloud is already invulnerable, like an iron bastion. But, if Diwu Qingru really opens the curtain to the final battle, Iron Cloud will still be the same as 8 years ago, unable to withstand a single blow. Chu Yang said sharply, do you really think that Diwu Qingru will let you build Iron Cloud into a monolithic block? If you really think this way, then you are not worthy of the position of the #1 general. Tai Longcheng laughed strangely, and unexpectedly praised from the bottom of his heart, not bad. You said it very well. He suddenly pondered and asked, what you said, is it because you have a secret intelligence network, or is it because you saw it? Is it your personal opinion? As soon as Tai Longcheng's words left his mouth, the eyes of the girl who had been standing silently on the side suddenly lit up. She looked at Chu Yang. Deep in her eyes, a trace of urgency emerged. Tai Longcheng asked this question with a very cautious tone. This was because the implications of this question were too great. If Chu Yang had such an intelligence network, he would be able to detect information that his own side could not. Then, it would be a great help. With this powerful intelligence network, Chu Yang would have the qualifications to work with Iron Cloud. Work together, not subordinate. But if Chu Yang did not have such an intelligence network and only speculated based on a few clues, then it would be even more frightening. It was enough to prove that this young man in front of them was not inferior to Diwu Qingru in terms of intelligence. In fact, he was even more intelligent. This was a heaven-shaking talent. One person could make a country prosper, one person could establish a country. This was the kind of person that people were talking about. Chu Yang was silent for a moment, and finally said, "I do not have such a powerful intelligence network." Tai Longcheng and the girls' faces changed color at the same time. Their expressions were always calm. Even when they heard about Diwu Qingru's conspiracy and his unexpected strength, their eyes only slightly moved. But when they heard Chu Yang's words, even their faces changed. All of this was because of the intelligence of this young man in front of them. "I didn't speculate about this either," Chu Yang added. He knew the meaning of Tai Longcheng's question. He also knew that if he let Tai Longcheng misunderstand, it would be very beneficial for him. But Chu Yang still gave up on this opportunity. Because if he really gave the other side such a hint, then in the future, there would be many things that they would ask for his opinion on. Even though he would be able to obtain power far beyond his expectations, but at that time, if he made a mistake, then he would directly lose millions of soldiers. It would directly affect the outcome of the war between the two countries. Once he made a mistake, even he would not have the opportunity to turn the situation around. Everything would still proceed according to the trajectory of his previous life, and it would be unstoppable. If Chu Yang really had this kind of ability, then of course he would not pass on this responsibility. But he was only relying on the memories of his previous life. He did not really have such keen observation skills. He was well aware of this point. So he gave up on this opportunity. However, his vague words also gave Tai Longcheng a vague hint. This person is definitely a world-shaking talent. Tai Longcheng raised his head and pondered for a while. Seeing that Chu Yang did not have any intention to continue, he knew that this matter was most likely a secret. Right now, the two sides had not really started to cooperate, so the other side naturally could not completely reveal everything. Now was the time to talk about conditions. But Tai Longcheng did not want to talk about it. Because he had other plans. He turned his head and looked at Chu Yang. "You said so much, what do you want?" "What you said is a secret that Diwu Qingru would never reveal. No matter what, you know a lot. Just this point alone is already very valuable. You don't like Diwu Qingru, I already believe that. But what do you want to do in Iron Cloud?" "What I want to do is actually very clear." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Can't you see it?" Tai Longcheng smiled and said, "Yes, but no matter what you do, it has nothing to do with me. The person you should be looking for the most is Bu Tiantai, not me." When he said the words Bu Tiantai, he did not look sideways, he only looked at Chu Yang. But his voice was a little strange. Chapter 78. Now that you have found me, you are worried that my cooperation with you will arouse Bu Tiantai's suspicions, and you want to stay out of it. Yet you say that I shouldn't have found you. Chu Yang sighed. "You are already so old. Why are you speaking so incoherently?" Ha 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 ha. Hearing Chu Yang's words, Tai Longcheng's guards glared at him. But Tai Longcheng himself laughed heartily and walked out in large strides. When he reached the door, he turned around and looked at Chu Yang. "I really like your swords, but 100,000 taels of gold is too expensive. I do have a lot of treasures. But I still have to keep them to save the lives of my soldiers, so I can't exchange them. But I really like your swords, what should I do?" Chu Yang was speechless. He had never seen such a thick-skinned person. It was clear that he wanted Chu Yang to give him a sword. He said angrily, "But I also can't bear to part with these swords, so I naturally can't give them to anyone. And the one I can't give them to the most is you." Ha 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 ha. Tai Longcheng laughed heartily. He wiped the tears from his eyes and said, "Little one, you will give them to me, I promise. At that time, I will pretend that I don't want them. I will make you give them to me several times before I reluctantly accept them. Just you wait." After he finished, he laughed heartily again. Leaving behind such a brainless sentence, he turned around and walked out the door. You want me to beg you? Then you just wait. Chu Yang snorted. The sky is not dark yet, but you are already dreaming. Outside the door, the sound of soldiers moving could be heard. In just a few breaths of time, all the soldiers on the street had left. During this time, there was not a single sound. In the distance, there was a faint noise. The street began to recover. Chu Yang turned around and was about to say something, but his mouth suddenly opened wide. There was only Jiyu Du-shing left in front of him. That strange girl had disappeared without him knowing. When she came here, it seemed like she only asked for the price and did nothing else. She just disappeared like that. Why did she leave? Chu Yang scratched his head. Who cares if she left or not? I only want to ask you. Jiyu Du-shing looked at him deeply. Are you going to intervene in the war between Iron Cloud Nation and Great Zhao Nation? Chu Yang nodded slightly and said, yes. This is a very unwise decision. You and I are just martial artists. You should know what a martial artist is. You know the status of martial artists in the lower three heavens, and the attitude of the imperial courts of the various countries towards martial artists. Moreover, both the imperial court and the battlefield are much more dangerous than the Jianghu. I don't think this is a good decision. I know that this is not the path of a martial artist. I also know that it is dangerous. I also know that as long as I throw myself into it, I will die without a burial place at any time. However, I have a reason to intervene. Chu Yang looked at Jiyu Du-shing and said deeply, you would rather die 10,000 times than not save Jiyu Miaoling. I have the same reason as you. Jiyu Du-shing looked into Chu Yang's eyes. He could see that in Chu Yang's eyes, there was a hidden deep pain and expectation. In fact, his feelings for her were even deeper than his feelings for Jiyu Miaoling. Jiyu Du-shing nodded slowly. At this moment, he suddenly understood why Chu Yang wanted to help him save Jiyu Miaoling. Although Chu Yang did not say it clearly, Jiyu Du-shing already knew his feelings. Because Chu Yang also had such a beautiful woman, therefore, he would not allow such a beautiful woman to die just like that. He would not allow such sincere and beautiful feelings to be annihilated with the wind. At this moment, Jiyu Du-shing's heart was moved. If you feel that it is dangerous, it is not too late to back out now. Chu Yang said lightly, I will still do what I promised you. I also want to back out. But I also know that the fastest place to improve one's cultivation is the battlefield. Jiyu Du-shing suddenly smiled. Moreover, his smile was unexpectedly bright. Moreover, I have already promised you that I will sell my 10 years to you. Although I want to back out, I value my promise more. He blinked and said, you only know that you keep your promise. But you don't want me to be a person who goes back on my words, right? Chu Yang fixed his gaze on him for a long time. Finally, he smiled and said, yes, I thought that you would go back on your words. I really did not expect that you would not. Jiyu Du-shing laughed and punched him hard on the shoulder. The two looked at each other and suddenly laughed. At this moment, a kind of brotherly feeling of going through life and death together slowly grew in each other's hearts. If you can work hard for me, I can work hard for you. It is that simple. These two youths, at this moment, truly recognized each other. But neither of them said it out loud. Instead, they used the excuse of keeping their promise to hide their sincerity. But both of them knew that the other knew what they knew. At this moment, their smiles were very warm. Surrounded by the troops, Tai Longcheng and the young girl were talking in a low voice. Tai Longcheng said, this person can be used. Very useful. The young girl said, oh? Is that so? You don't have to be so sarcastic with me. What are you doing here? And you came here alone. This person wants to deal with Diwu Qingru. Although I do not know the reason, when Heavenly Armament Pavilion opened, the two words Heavenly Armament let me know his intentions. Tai Longcheng smiled, there is no need to doubt this. No one would be stupid enough to open Heavenly Armament Pavilion in Iron Cloud. Because these two words are taboo in Iron Cloud. But he opened it. So I think that this person does not know what happened before. The young girl nodded and suddenly turned her head. Second uncle, is it because of this? So, Yes, it is because of this that I came here. Because he met you at the city gate, and you showed a bit too much interest in him. It is a good thing to be thirsty for talent, but you are still young. Although I am old, I can still help you look at people. Tai Long Cheng smiled. I just did not think that you would come so quickly. Then everything that second uncle said to him must be true, right? The young girl smiled thoughtfully. Every word is a hint. Second uncle is indeed wise. He wants to deal with Diwu Qingru, and you appeared here. Of course I will let him know how much effort we have put in to deal with Diwu Qingru. This is a prerequisite. However, there are some secrets that I do not know about. But this has opened up the scars in your heart. The young girl took a deep breath and said, I know that in the entire Iron Cloud Nation, the person who does not want to talk about the past is you, second uncle. But today, you took the initiative to bring it up. Second uncle is doing this for me. It is also for Iron Cloud. Tai Long Cheng walked in silence. His face was stiff. Not wanting to talk about it does not mean it did not happen. Since you plan to use this person, then the more he knows, the better. There will be a day when second uncle cannot go to the battlefield. I do not want you to make a wrong judgment because of the old history. So I must talk about it. The scars must be opened. Chapter 79. Even though this person can be used, we still need to guard against him. He wants to deal with Diwu Qingru. There is no doubt about this. But for what reason, he never said. The strangest thing is that in his eyes, there is no power. That is the most surprising part. Tai Bu Tian pondered. Could it be that heaven above? Are you talking about the trial? That is possible. But if that is the case, your identity cannot be exposed. But there has been no such legend for a long time. Seize the time. Let the intelligence agents search everywhere to see if there are any strange but powerful youths. Tai Long Cheng said casually, if there are, and there is more than one, then we can be sure. But we still need to keep our distance from those people. Of course. They can be used, but they cannot be controlled. This Chu Yang is an abandoned disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. The girl pondered and said slowly. Her voice was so slow that it seemed as if it would break at any moment. Abandoned disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. It can't be, right? Wu Yunliang is willing to abandon such a talent. I also think it is strange. The girl said, moreover, I think that the person next to him is from that place. The person next to him? The young man next to him is also very scary. Moreover, his origin seems to be even more mysterious than Chu Yang. He just appeared out of nowhere. But no matter what, he listens to Chu Yang. So, we just need to see what Chu Yang does. In addition, find a way to contact Wu Yunliang of Beyond the Heavens sect. I want to ask him. Okay. Tell the Ministry of Justice that there is no need to investigate the case of the Heavenly Bandit. Tai Bu Tian laughed. After investigating this and that, if they really find something, then you and I will have to clean up his mess. So second uncle also thought of this. The girl's face turned red. Obviously, she was shy about this vulgar phrase clean up his mess. Everyone has to clean up their mess. Tai Long Cheng laughed. But after saying this, the girl pondered for a moment. Her eyes lit up. Although this phrase was vulgar, it seemed to contain some profound meaning. At a fork in the road, the girl parted ways with Tai Long Cheng. She waved her hand and lightly walked away. Then, she turned a corner and disappeared. Tai Long Cheng watched the girl disappear from his sight before he let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the girl's back, his eyes were filled with pity. He sighed heavily and muttered, the burden of Iron Cloud is very difficult to bear. No matter how difficult it is, as long as Marshall is here, Iron Cloud will always exist. The Deputy General beside him said with great respect. It seemed that he had unparalleled confidence in Tai Long Cheng. I am only a marshal, not. Iron Cloud Cheng shook his head and did not finish his sentence. He shouted, let's go back. Not far ahead was the Heavenly Might Manor. The Heaven's Might Manor was Tai Long Cheng's residence. Tai Long Cheng's title in Iron Cloud Nation was Tian Wei Prince, I'm old. It's time for me to make way for the younger generation. Tai Long Cheng thought silently and ordered, from now on, all military matters, no matter how big or small, must be reported to His Highness at the same time. As long as there is no all-out war, don't expect me to make any more decisions. This old man needs to rest for a few years. Everyone who heard this was shocked. Yes, I'll be fine. Tai Long Cheng said casually, if he can't handle it, then there is no need for this nation to exist. These words were said with deep meaning. Although Tai Long Cheng had left, his prohibition order had not been lifted. At Chu Yang's place, there were still a lot of people watching, but no one dared to come in. But the two people in the restaurant were not worried at all. It was close to noon. Jiyu Du Xing grabbed a lot of silver and went out to buy some food. The table was filled with food and wine, and the two ate and drank to their heart's content. Just as the wine was being poured, Jiyu Du Xing picked up the bowl and said, Chu Yang, I toast you. Good. I really don't want to drink this bowl of wine. Oh, why? After drinking this bowl of wine, I, Jiyu Du Xing, will no longer be Du Xing. It doesn't match my name at all. Then why don't you change your name to Jiyu Shuangfei? That's fine, but, will you have a threesome with me, or will I have a threesome with you? Get lost. You'll have a threesome with 2 pigs. Ha ha ha. After 3 rounds of wine, there were already 2 empty wine jars on the floor. The other 2 jars on the table were also half empty. These jars were 5 pounds of wine, and they were the best of the best. Jiyu Du Xing's tongue was already a little big. Chu Yang, I can see that you are very strong, but I really don't understand, which clan do you come from? It doesn't make sense. In this world, there is actually someone who I, Jiyu Du Xing, admire. This shouldn't be. I don't have a clan. Chu Yang was silent for a moment. He picked up the bowl and drank it in one gulp. No clan. I am an orphan. Strictly speaking, I am an abandoned child. Chu Yang laughed mischievously, and tears came out of his eyes. I don't even know my name. This name was given to me by my master. There was a moment of silence. That's good, at least you still have hope. I don't know which corner of this world you still have parents. Jiyu Du Xing sighed, I have parents, and I also know my name, but my parents were killed. I will never see them again. Cheers. Let's drink, let's drink. Yes, let's drink, let's not talk about this. Chu Yang, before I met you, I didn't have a brother. Hihi, now I have one. You have one? Where is he? Why don't I see him? It doesn't matter if you don't see him. It's fine as long as I see him, ha ha ha. Brother. What is a brother? Brother, haha, a brother is a brother, not a thing. Jiyu Du Xing laughed. If there is a mountain of knives in front of a brother, then I am willing to step over the mountain of knives. This is a brother. Even if my brother doesn't treat me as a brother, as long as I treat him as a brother, then he is my brother. Jiyu Du Xing was finally drunk. He stood up shakily, and suddenly punched himself in the chest, and roared to the sky, for more than 10 years, I have never been so happy. Ha ha ha. I am so happy. After he finished speaking, he suddenly fell asleep on the table. Chu Yang's eyes were already somewhat hazy, but he still held the bowl of wine and poured it into his mouth. After he drank the bowl, he suddenly paused, and muttered repeatedly, if there is a mountain of knives in front of a brother, then I am willing to step over the mountain of knife. This is a brother. Even if my brother doesn't treat me as a brother, as long as I treat him as a brother, then he is my brother. He suddenly nodded, and then shook his head. He smiled, and muttered to himself, if you can treat your brother like this, then your brother will naturally treat you like this. Brothers are each other. First there is a brother, then there is a younger brother. It is 2 people, and not 1 person singing a one-man show. His eyes looked into the void, and he said in a low and deep voice, my brother won't sing a one-man show either. These words were spoken in a very low voice, but they were powerful and resonating. A trace of nostalgia flashed in his eyes. At this moment, he thought of Tan Tan, and thought of that brother who had obtained only 1 treasure in his life, and wanted to give it to him. He was also a brother. Then, he directly lifted the wine jar, and poured it into his mouth. The wine splashed everywhere. The consequence of this drinking session was that the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was directly closed. The two people slept soundly in the hall. There was an endless stream of people coming and going outside the door, but the sound of snoring came from inside the door, and the fragrance of wine and meat wafted in the air. The two people indulged themselves for once. Both of them knew that from today onwards, they would probably never be able to relax like today. The two people woke up in the afternoon, and their bodies were already dripping wet. The two people looked at each other, and suddenly laughed in unison. At this moment, a knocking sound came from outside the door. "Excuse me, is Chu Yang here?" It was the voice of a young girl. Chu Yang was startled. This voice was very familiar. It was Wu Chen-chen's voice. Chapter 80. When he opened the door, he saw Wu Chen-chen standing outside. She was wearing a green robe. "Chu Yang, it really is you." Wu Chen-chen looked at Chu Yang with a complicated expression. She did not even dream that Chu Yang would suddenly come to Ironcloud Citadel. Moreover, he immediately attracted the attention of Grand Elder Bu Tian. When Tai Bu Tian asked her, Wu Chen-chen did not believe that the talkative Chu Yang was the same person she saw at Purple Bamboo Garden. Wu Chen-chen thought that it was just a coincidence. There must be another talented young man with the same name as Chu Yang. Even though Purple Bamboo Garden's Chu Yang was smart, his cultivation was too low to be evaluated by Grand Elder Bu Tian. But now, when this familiar face appeared in front of her, she no longer had any doubts. "Senior Wu, why are you here?" Chu Yang asked with some surprise. "What, I can't come?" As Wu Chen-chen spoke, her face turned red. She remembered what Du Shiqing said to Grand Elder Bu Tian, "This young man's life is really pitiful." He fell in love with his senior sister, but his senior brother wanted to steal her away. In a moment of impulse, he killed his senior brother. Ah, what a pity for this talent. His senior martial sister seemed to be the female manager of Beyond the Heavens sect. Thinking about this, Wu Chen-chen's face became hot. Female head of Beyond the Heavens sect. Father only has one female head. Could it be that Chu Yang likes me? But this matter was so sudden and unexpected. "Ah, you can come, you can come." Chu Yang scratched his head and took a step back. "Senior sister, please come in. You are no longer a disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. Father has already sent an order to expel you from the sect. You cannot be called senior sister." Wu Chen-chen felt that it was a pity. Chu Yang was expelled from the sect just like that. In addition, Wu Chen-chen wanted to use this opportunity to put some distance between the two of them. This was Ironcloud Citadel, after all. This was the Ironcloud Citadel. If something happened, Chu Yang would not care, but she would lose the face of Beyond the Heavens sect. "Ah, then I'll call you younger sister." Chu Yang patted his head and said, "It seems that you're older than me. I'll call you Qian, elder sister." Wu Chen-chen's charming face blushed as she said angrily, "Why are you being so glib? Come with me. Go with you. The Empress Dowager sent me to invite you. I really can't see what's so good about you that the Empress Dowager actually wants to see you." Wu Chen-chen rolled her eyes at him. "If he wants to see me, then I won't go." Chu Yang calmly smiled and said, "If he wants you to invite me, then I will go." See him and invite him were two different things. It was related to Tai Bu Tian's attitude. From beginning to end, he had surrounded Tai Bu Tian with his news. His eyes were sharp, and his agility was shocking. Du Shiqing spared no effort in flattering him, and Heavenly Armament Pavilion was unstoppable. Now, there was Tai Long Cheng's recommendation. Tai Long Cheng's recommendation was also added. Tai Long Cheng would definitely explain this matter to Tai Bu Tian when he saw him. Of this, Chu Yang was certain. And Tai Long Cheng's description would prove another thing. Chu Yang's conjecture was incomparable wisdom, his accurate judgment of the world's situation and his thorough understanding of Diwu Qing Ru. All of this was related to the survival of Ironcloud Nation and the outcome of the battle between Tai Butian and Diwu Qing Ru. If Tai Butian did not want to see him, then that would be the strangest thing. Ever since Chu Yang left Beyond the Heavens sect and joined Du Shiqing's team, he had been planning for this day, And this day had finally arrived. At this critical juncture, Chu Yang naturally would not give up this opportunity to raise his status. The Empress Dowager sent me to invite you. Is this okay? Wu Qian snappily said, the Empress Dowager knew that I knew you, so she specifically sent me here. Plus, there were 10 guards from the Empress Dowager escorting me. The carriage that came was the Empress Dowager's personal carriage. 10 precious horses flanked the carriage. This is the Empress Dowager's courtesy. In all these years, no one in Iron Cloud Nation has been able to enjoy this kind of treatment. Oh! Chu Yang could not help but be surprised. He also thought that Tai Butian would send someone to invite him, but he really did not think that it would be such a grand invitation. Big Boss Chu was swaying as he sat in an extremely luxurious carriage. In front of him, there were 8 imposing golden-armored knights. 4 of them were leading the way. They were sitting on white horses that were as white as snow. There wasn't a single strand of hair on them. In the middle of the procession, there were 2 golden-armored knights guarding the carriage. Behind the procession, there were 4 golden-armored knights guarding the rear. In addition, there were 10 soldiers in silver armor. Each one of them was standing straight like a statue. When they walked, they raised their arms, raised their feet, and landed on the ground. No matter which direction one looked at them, they were all in a straight line. They were extremely uniform. The orderly footsteps, the sculpture-like faces of the soldiers, their resolute gazes, and their majestic formation formed a unique scenery. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and tried his best to put on a calm face. He sat there solemnly. But in his heart, he was thinking, wow, this is too mighty. When the world is at peace, I will also have a troop like this. No matter where I go, I will bring them with me. How cool. However, even though it was very cool, Chu Yang still pulled the curtain tightly. If he showed his face, Diwu Qingru would probably know tomorrow that Tai Butian invited him. That would not be a good thing. Safety first. Mr. Chu has graced us with your presence. Bu Tian is very grateful. Please sit. Tai Butian was gentle and elegant. His white robe was spotless, like a tree facing the wind. His smile was very friendly. Unexpectedly, the place where Tai Bu Tian received Chu Yang was Bu Tian Pavilion. Moreover, along the way, they did not see even half a shadow. It was as if the meeting between the two of them was an extremely secret. The place where they met was a small lake behind Bu Tian Pavilion. There was an island in the middle of the lake, and there was a pavilion on the island. The guards escorted Chu Yang to the island and then left. Chu Yang looked at Tai Butian. His eyes were calm and unmoved. It had to be said that Tai Butian's courteous treatment had once made his heart warm up for a moment. But now, that feeling had disappeared. If it was any other person of the same age, they might be so grateful that they would shed tears and be loyal to him from then on. But Chu Yang was a monster who had experienced 2 lives. It was already good enough that his heart was moved a little. Your Highness, may I know what instructions you have for me? Chu Yang was not in a hurry. I don't dare to talk about instructions. Mr. Chu is very talented. You should know why I have met you today. Tai Butian smiled gently. I am ignorant and do not understand the meaning of the Supreme. Tai Butian sighed softly. He stood with his hands behind his back and turned to look at the calm surface of the lake. He said lightly, Mr. Chu comes from a faction of the pugilistic world. You should know the situation of the world. Although the imperial court and the pugilistic world are clearly separated, they are fundamentally of the same origin. There is no distinction between them. If the imperial court is the circle of power that dominates everything, then the pugilistic world is a subcircle of power. Tai Butian said quietly, the reason why it is called a subcircle of power is to say that it is a substitute. Only when this group of people in power has reached a certain level, when the people are in dire straits, there will be heroes who will rise up and call for help. They will replace it. And the new power of the imperial court will definitely come from the pugilistic world, or they will borrow some power from the imperial court. But the dominant power will be the people of the pugilistic world. After a series of changes, this group will form its own power, its own circle and its own rules of conduct. The one who succeeds in the end will become the leader of the imperial court. Chu Yang thought carefully and finally nodded slowly. He said, "The words of the Supreme are indeed true." He recalled the changes in the world in the past few thousand years. Countless countries had fallen and countless countries had risen. They had indeed followed this path. The new regime had indeed risen from the pugilistic world. Although most of them were destroyed, there were also many who succeeded. Chapter 81. My ancestors were once a great clan in the pugilistic world. Back then, the Tai clan of the Eastern Mountain was also a force to be reckoned with before they entered the imperial court. Tai Butian didn't look back at all. He continued slowly, however, once a faction in the pugilistic world becomes the master of the imperial court, then it will have to abide by the rules of the imperial court. The pugilistic world's methods may be able to govern a clan or a group of people, but it cannot govern a country. This is the limitation of the pugilistic world. Therefore, when it comes to this point, it is inevitable to give up some things in exchange for some things. And those things that are given up are often meritorious ministers. The pugilistic world is the pugilistic world of brothers, while the imperial court is the imperial court of the emperor and his subject. If a subject treats the emperor as a brother, then he will definitely be purged by his brother. Since ancient times, when the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound is cooked. When the birds are gone, the bow is put away. When the war is over, the cavalry is gone. When the emperor and his subjects rise, the brothers perish. This saying is rather heartless, but it is necessary. Those who sigh that the hound is cooked after the cunning rabbit is dead are all losers. The so-called emperor, after giving up all these, still has to bear the infamy of the ages. Only when he can bear all these, then he is qualified to be an emperor. Governing a country cannot be based on feelings or brothers, it must be based on methods and laws. This is the biggest conflict between the imperial court and the pugilistic world. Chu Yang frowned. He pondered over these words with a heavy heart, guessing what Tai Butian meant by these words. Therefore, the emperor is heartless. Tai Butian concluded. Because if the emperor is sentimental, then he cannot govern the country well. Everyone knows how valuable and reliable a brother is. But when a brother becomes arrogant because of the emperor's favor, even if he knows that this brother is still loyal to him, he can only bear the pain and get rid of him. He can only cry silently in his dreams at night, or face the torrential infamy of the world when he is awake, using such a price in exchange for political stability and world peace. Tai Butian turned back and looked at Chu Yang. Mr. Chu has no intention of joining the imperial court. The reason why Mr. Chu has come to Iron Cloud is to use the identity of a pugilistic man to borrow the power of Iron Cloud to overthrow Diwu Qingru. Tai Butian said deeply, this is Mr. Chu's main purpose in coming to Iron Cloud. Mr. Chu does not want to be Butian's minister, but to work with Butian. What mending the heavens couldn't do, Mr. Chu will do it in the martial world. This is Mr. Chu's method, and thought. The reason is that Mr. Chu has the pride of a Jianghu man. This kind of arrogance would not let Mr. Chu be willing to submit to anyone. I am even more unwilling to be ordered around by others. He smiled with a hint of sadness and asked slowly, Mr. Chu, I wonder if Bu Tian is right? Chu Yang was horrified. Looking at Tai Butian's eyes, which were so clear that they didn't seem to contain any impurities, his heart was shaken. This Tai Butian had actually figured out his thoughts during the first conversation between the two of them. Chu Yang's evaluation of this grand elder Bu Tian immediately rose to a whole new level due to his ingenuity. You're right. Chu Yang's eyes were half closed as he said lightly, that's exactly what I meant. Ha ha. Tai Butian smiled bitterly. After a while, he said, today is the first time I have met Mr. Chu, and I want to make this clear. Because if Mr. Chu does things with this mentality, there will be conflicts between us. And this conflict is the conflict between the imperial court and Jianghu. It cannot be reconciled. You worry too much. Chu Yang said casually, what the Grand Supreme is worried about is the conflict after the world is at peace. However, I have no interest in the power of the imperial court. Once Diwu Qingru is defeated, from that moment on, the Grand Supreme will never see me again. I know, I know that Mr. Chu will definitely make this choice. Tai Butian sighed deeply, but I also know that when that time comes, there are countless places and links in Iron Cloud that cannot be separated from Mr. Chu. Once Mr. Chu leaves, it will cause uncontrollable turmoil in Iron Cloud Nation. Your Highness, may I ask how old you are this year? Chu Yang asked. I have wasted 10 years. Tai Butian's eyes were filled with melancholy and disappointment. You are too immersed in politics and the art of the emperor. Chu Yang said coldly, everything is measured by the imperial court. Everything is decided by the mind. Everything is decided by the interests of the people. Everything is judged by the big picture. This is too tiring. It is also unnecessary. There are so many things to consider, but there is one thing that should be considered the most, but there is not enough consideration. That is life and death, victory and defeat. Chu Yang coldly said, right now, Iron Cloud Nation is like a candle in the wind, on the verge of collapse. Great Zhao is 10 times stronger than Iron Cloud. Great Zhao's 10 dragon and tiger generals are all great commanders. Diwu Qingru is even more powerful in Great Zhao. His mind is as cold as ice, overlooking the world and playing this game of chess as he pleases. Iron Cloud could be destroyed at any time. The lives of millions of people are only a matter of time. In the face of such a huge crisis, Grand Elder is thinking about politics after the world is at peace. Chu Yang sneered, I don't know where Grand Elder gets such great confidence, or perhaps arrogance. But if Grand Elder holds on to this belief and confronts Diwu Qingru, then I, Chu Yang, might as well live in seclusion. Out of sight, out of mind. Tai Butian's expression changed and he looked deeply at Chu Yang. Suddenly, he bowed to the ground and said, Mr. Chu is right. Butian has learned. Now is indeed not the time to think about these things. After meeting, the two of them had already had a verbal contest. From the looks of it, Chu Yang had the upper hand. Tai Butian's words were to dispel Chu Yang's original beliefs and make Chu Yang willing to be a subject. Although what he said was true, it was still too serious and biased. But Chu Yang's counterattack clearly expressed that his decision was not to be changed. Moreover, it pointed out that Tai Butian's mentality was wrong. What he said was naturally too exaggerated. Even without Tai Butian's rebuttal, Chu Yang himself knew that Tai Butian had been struggling to survive under Diwu Qingru's pressure. How could he not consider life, death, victory, and defeat? Tai Butian was probably thinking about it every day, every hour, every moment. Therefore, Chu Yang's counterattack was only using a loophole in his words. It wasn't that Tai Butian really thought that way. Tai Butian used the overall situation of the world to pressure Chu Yang, and Chu Yang used Diwu Qingru to intimidate him, using the lives of millions of people of Iron Cloud Nation to pressure him. Both of them went overboard with their words, but they both understood each other's true intentions. Yet, neither of them said it directly, because it would be too sharp. Tai Butian couldn't afford to lose, and similarly, Chu Yang couldn't break off relations. Between the two of them, a delicate situation had formed. Pressing back and forth, Tai Butian's last sentence showed weakness and ended the prelude to this battle of words. It meant that Tai Butian would no longer work on this aspect today. Senior Chu's words are indeed sharp. Tai Butian smiled. The Supreme Highness is also advancing step by step. Chu Yang also smiled. Senior Chu, you have spent a lot of effort on this journey. First, you showed yourself, and with the momentum of a thunderbolt and lightning, shook Butian's heart and made me want to recruit you. Then, with the help of Divine Dr. Du along the way, you made use of Butian's weakness of being thirsty for talent to further arouse my urgency. Chapter 82. I don't want to follow the path planned by others, but I have no choice but to follow Mr. Chu's arrangements. Although I feel aggrieved, I can still enjoy it. Mr. Chu has already gained the upper hand. You're just a commoner, but you've created an outstanding identity for yourself with your own efforts. You've even used all sorts of schemes to express your unwillingness to be under others, so that I can't force you. I can only discuss military and national affairs in the capacity of a partner. Tai Butian smiled helplessly and shook his head lightly. Mr. Chu is all alone, Yet he was able to create such a situation. The ingenuity of his intentions, the accuracy of his calculations, and the precision of his grasp of the situation really makes me want to prostrate myself in admiration. Mr. Chu deserves to be called a talent. Chu Yong narrowed his eyes and smiled. I've always welcomed such compliments. The more the better. Now that the negotiation time had passed and Tai Butian had already given in, Chu Yong naturally had to relax and ease the atmosphere. Tai Butian was stunned. Then, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. He hurriedly woke up and covered his mouth with his hand. Then, he wiped the corners of his mouth without leaving a trace and said with a smile, Mr. Chu is really humorous. At this moment, Chu Yong felt a chill run down his spine and almost wanted to flee. Tu. What was Tu? Could a woman become Tu? That was a princess, okay? However, Tai Butian was clearly a man, yet at this moment, he was behaving like a woman, covering his mouth and laughing, his eyes rolling. Chu Yong's eyes widened and the corners of his mouth twitched. Heavens! You asked me to reverse fate and history, but you want me to work with a transvestite? Chu Yong only felt his heart twitching. He finally understood. No wonder this guy cultivated that icy heart divine technique. With such a demeanor, if he didn't cultivate that, it would really be a pity. When he saw Tai Butian wipe his mouth as if to cover it up and then act like he was swallowing the world, Chu Yong only felt sweat all over his body. In an instant, the world was spinning. Mr. Chu. Mr. Chu. Tai Butian saw that he was in a daze and asked. Chu Yong instinctively felt cold sweat seeping out of his forehead. Thinking that he would have to work with such a transvestite for at least 2 years, Chu Yong suddenly felt that his future was dark and his life was full of tragedies. Mr. Chu, given the current situation of Iron Cloud, if Mr. Chu is in charge, where should we start? Tai Butian smiled, seemingly unaware of the change in Chu Yong's mood, and asked in an increasingly reserved manner. Well, this. I need to think about it first. Chu Yong held his forehead with one hand, and pretended to be in deep thought. He didn't even need to think about it. The scene just now was simply too shocking. To resist foreign aggression, I must first pacify the internal situation. Chu Yong forcibly operated the Tribulation Heaven Divine technique to suppress his churning thoughts. To resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Tai Butian couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. How familiar were these words? The first time he heard these words, the Iron Cloud Nation's royal court underwent a great change. The second time he heard these words, 3 million soldiers were turned into skeletons on the battlefield. The third time he heard these words, in the royal court, Imperial Uncle Tai Long Cheng raised his butcher's knife and killed all the martial artists in the royal court. Blood flowed like rivers. Now that Chu Yong was here, the first thing he said was still these words. Could it be that another reign of terror was coming? That's right. Tai Butian smiled and said, but the problem is, the external enemies are in the open, while the internal enemies are in the dark. It's just a selection. Chu Yong smiled confidently. What if I entrust this matter to Mr. Chu? Tai Butian smiled and formally asked for cooperation. Not enough. Chu Yong shook his head. Not enough. I heard that Your Highness has established a Bu Tian pavilion? Chu Yong asked gently. Then, he rolled his eyes and said indifferently, since we want to cooperate, we should trust each other. I want Bu Tian pavilion. Tai Butian looked at him coldly. For a long time, her eyes were cold and she didn't move. After a long time, Tai Butian stood up and walked slowly to the railing of the pavilion with her hands behind her back. She looked at the lake and didn't speak for a long time. A gentle breeze blew, causing his white robe to flutter. Before I was 11, I was just a child. My father was kind and loving, and my mother was gentle. I also had an elder sister. Everyone treated me like a treasure. I was carefree and only knew how beautiful this world was. Tai Butian's back was facing Chu Yong. Her eyes were already a little hazy, but her voice was still calm. Ever since I was born, my father had always been unhappy and had always blocked any news about me. At that time, I didn't know why. That year, my father was in golden armor and personally led the army into battle. In my eyes, My father was like a god of war in the heavens. He was invincible and undefeatable. However, in less than half a year, the world suddenly collapsed. My father came back, but he was carried back and was on the verge of death. My mother went forward to serve him, but my father suddenly went crazy and stabbed her to death. He killed his beloved wife. 2 drops of tears flowed slowly down Tai Butian's cheeks. Chu Yang's body shook and he couldn't help but raise his head. Hearing this, he was also greatly surprised. Why did the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation kill his own wife? Then, my father suddenly became a different person. He repeatedly issued decrees to execute my elder sister and brother-in-law's entire family. Then, he ordered second uncle to lead an army of 100 battles to attack the palace and kill everyone in the palace. For a time, blood flowed like a river inside and outside the palace. Everyone knew that second uncle was going to rebel, but later they found out that he wasn't. Then, my father took my hand and said only one sentence to me before he fell into a coma. Tai Butian straightened her back and said in a low but trembling voice with determination and heartache, "From now on, you are called Tai Butian. The sky of Iron Cloud Nation has already collapsed. I hope you can mend it. You must always remember that to be a ruler, you must be ruthless. You must be ruthless enough to kill your enemies, but you must also be ruthless enough to kill yourself." Then, my father grabbed second uncle's hand and said, "I'll give it to you." Then, my father fell into a coma and didn't wake up. Chu Yang frowned and remained silent. However, he was thinking in his heart. Tai Butian's words were vague, but one thing was for sure: when the Emperor of Iron Cloud Nation killed his wife and daughter, his mind was completely clear. Even a tiger wouldn't eat poison. Why did he do this? Chu Yang faintly felt that there seemed to be a huge secret behind this. Tai Butian took a deep breath. I hated my father. I hated him for killing all my family members, but second uncle was very strict with me. He announced to the public that from now on, I was the Emperor of Iron Cloud. When I grew up, I would be the Emperor of Iron Cloud. From then on, second uncle invited countless teachers to teach me. Every day, there would be at least 10 teachers waiting for me. Every day, I would only get 3 hours of sleep. Even when I was eating and drinking, there would be people talking to me. If I couldn't remember, second uncle would beat me up. At that time, there were 315 days in a year. At least 300 days, my body was bruised and swollen. Second uncle was more strict with me than any other strict teacher in the world. Chapter 83. I thought that he regretted it, but only later did I know that he wasn't. Tai Butian's voice was very soft, as if she was sleep-talking. At that time, I didn't understand. Since he had killed mother and my sisters, why was he crying? It's unbearable. Serves you right. Even now, I still hate him, but after so many years, especially when I gradually became more sensible, I realized that I couldn't hate him anymore. Tai Butian kept her hands behind her back, letting the tears slowly flow down her face. Her eyes were complicated. It was only in recent years that I realized how much pain father had to suffer. As a father, he had to endure so much. As a man, he had to endure so much. And as a ruler, he had to endure even more. Tai Butian took a deep breath. And I had to learn things under second uncle's high pressure. Countless times, I had to learn until I broke down and cried out loud. Then, second uncle would use his whip and fist to wake me up time and time again. Later on, not only did I have to learn things, but I also had to learn scheming, tactics, martial arts and the mind of a ruler. Second uncle engraved the words that Imperial Father told me back then on my desk, hung it in my bedroom, and placed it everywhere I went. Before every meal, I had to recite these words. Second uncle fought on the battlefield, strategized, and won battles from 1,000 miles away. He held the political and military power of the whole country. At that time, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to talk to me. But every day, he would ask my teachers what they had learned that day. Then, what awaited me was a fierce beating, as if he would never be satisfied. Finally, I didn't dare to be lazy. Tai Butian's throat made a gurgling sound, as if she was swallowing something. I hated father, I hated second uncle. But one day, I saw second uncle using the juice of the black demon flower to dye his hair. At that time, second uncle was only 32 years old. Second uncle was famous for his handsome looks in the whole of Ironcloud. But ever since father fell ill, second uncle's white hair began to grow out strand by strand. In the end, there were more strands than black hair. Second uncle had to dye his hair every once in a while. At that time, I despised him. Why would an old man dye his hair black? But it was only later that I found out that second uncle was the pillar of the whole Ironcloud nation when father fell ill and I was young. His health was Ironcloud nation's greatest hope. If the soldiers find out that he has a head full of white hair, the blow to their morale will be unparalleled. Every day, second uncle is full of vigor on the battlefield and the drill ground. When he walks, he raises the wind. When he shouts, he can make hundreds of thousands of soldiers tremble in fear. But every night, when he comes home, he can't even lift his feet. Even speaking was strenuous, and his hands and feet were trembling when he was eating. He was a revered martial artist at that time. Yet, I'm so tired every day. After I finally understood the pain and hardships of Father Emperor and second uncle, I began to wholeheartedly immerse myself in learning. Every time second uncle and Diwu Qingru fought a battle, they would come back and rehearse dozens of times with me. Finally, 3 years ago, I began to take control of the military and political affairs, and began my true career as an eunuch. At that time, I realized that before this, all the decisions were made by second uncle in my name. The entire Ironcloud nation, even the whole world, knew that Ironcloud had a natural-born king. Ironcloud is full of hope. No one knows how this natural king managed to survive all these years. How can there be a natural-born king in this world? The road to becoming a king is so cruel. Tai Bu Tian's voice became sorrowful and cynical. When I first took control of the government, I couldn't control anything well. Second uncle was like a god, standing in the court every day. Anyone who was dissatisfied or doubted him, he would drag them out and behead them. At that time, second uncle was even more tyrannical than a tyrant. But when I truly took control of Ironcloud, second uncle no longer appeared in the court. I heard that after he observed me for 3 months, he went back and said to second aunt, "I am relieved." Then second uncle fell asleep standing up straight. That time, he slept for 3 days and 3 nights. Even his family was afraid. Tai Bu Tian took a deep breath and exhaled. Ironcloud's military and political affairs are finally on the right track. I started to establish Bu Tian Pavilion again and recruited heroes. I hope that someone can help me. I really hope that someone can share some of the burden with me. Ironcloud's stability, the millions of people living and working in peace and contentment, I don't know how much pain the upper echelons have to endure in exchange. I am too tired. Second uncle is also too tired. Tai Bu Tian said indifferently. His voice was very flat, but Chu Yang could hear the deep weariness in his voice. Second uncle recommended you to me. Tai Bu Tian did not turn around. He only said with certainty, "I trust second uncle, so I trust you. If you want Bu Tian Pavilion, I can give it to you. But you can only start as a minister. I cannot directly give you a high position. I believe you understand this. I only need to wait for the day when you can convince the masses. Then, I will give you all the information on Bu Tian Pavilion. If you suspect someone, don't use him. If you use him, don't doubt him." After Tai Bu Tian finished speaking, he floated away without looking back. He floated on the water. His white figure was like a white cloud in the wind. He flashed a few times, and a few ripples slowly spread on the water's surface. He had already disappeared from Chu Yang's sight. He did not turn around. He did not want Chu Yang to see the tears on his face. Chu Yang slowly sat down. He was silent for a long time. He was digesting Tai Bu Tian's words. Tai Bu Tian's words were very sincere, very honest, and very touching. Chu Yang had once suspected that Tai Bu Tian's purpose in saying these words was to recruit him to work for him. As a wily old fox who had lived 2 lives, Chu Yang recalled the dark soul poison that he had inadvertently learned in the upper 3 heavens in his previous life. He reviewed the entire conversation. Dark spirit poison bamboo was a strange martial art. It did not have any power, but it could see through every lie. This was a martial art left behind by the 3 Stars divine clan. It could guarantee that every person who had dark soul poison would not be deceived by anyone. But under the appraisal of dark soul poison, Chu Yang found that every word Tai Bu Tian said was the truth, even though there were too many loopholes in his words and too many incomprehensible things. But things were just so strange. Anyone would be able to see the huge loopholes in Tai Bu Tian's words, but they were 100% true. For example, why did the Emperor of Iron Cloud kill his beloved wife after being seriously injured? Why did he kill his daughter's entire family? Why did he massacre the imperial palace? These were all incomprehensible and unreasonable things, but they were the truth. Chu Yang also did not understand what was going on. Even though he had already experienced history, he still did not know. After all, Tai Bu Tian had died too early in his previous life. He did not have time to explain anything. These were all filled with layers of fog. Chu Yang could only feel that this was filled with a mountain-like oppression and a deep pain as deep as the sea. Chu Yang thought for a long time and realized that his brain was still a mess. He simply gave up on continuing to think. The affairs of the emperor's family were originally unique. It was even more impossible to fathom the thoughts of an emperor. Especially if it was a baseless guess, there was even less hope. Chu Yang only knew that Tai Bu Tian had agreed to his request for cooperation. During this process, Tai Bu Tian did not even bargain. This was, of course, because Tai Bu Tian was open-minded and tolerant. He indeed had the magnanimity of an emperor and the mentality of a gambler. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,